This is Zeke Draker. He was about to take the entrance exam for Dragon Academy without training at all for it. The kids from the strongest families were clowning on him, saying he was going to fail hard. The examiner announced that the test was about to start. The test was simple. You just had to crack the stone to pass, but there was a hidden catch. This was a regeneration stone, and it healed itself after every hit. For this exam, any weapon was allowed to break the stone. The first guy tried breaking it with a sword, and he failed without even managing a scratch on the stone. The students kept trying one by one, and every single one got eliminated on the spot. Everyone was nervous because it seemed impossible to pass. Then it was Zeke's turn. He walked down to the arena, and the examiner asked where his weapon was. Zeke said he'd rather fight barehanded. Everyone started laughing. Sure, he was gonna bomb. Everybody had already failed using a weapon, so going barehanded was basically asking to fail. The kid stared down the stone, raised his fist with a terrifying aura, and threw a punch so hard it made the stone explode. When the smoke cleared, half the stone was gone. The arena went dead silent. The examiner had no idea what just happened. Only a 4- or 5-star warrior could pull off something like that. Everyone was thinking the same thing. What the heck is this kid? A secret Zeke was keeping is that he's a martial arts monster disguised as a failure. This kid is so powerful that besides having a crazy strong body, he's also insanely tough. In the director's office, he took her aura head-on without even flinching. The teacher was practically pissing herself in fear while Zeke was just chilling. One thing they don't know is that Zeke was already the strongest man in the world way before that academy even existed. In fact, he's the actual founder of the Eldragon family. Years ago, his name was Gilphase, and he was the #1 hunter in the world. He was the only one who ever reached rank 10 stars. Nobody else in history ever came close. But when his time was up, he died and reincarnated years later in the body of a baby, all thanks to the fruit of immortality he had eaten. Looking around, he saw there were other babies too, and soon he recognized the place. Realizing he'd reincarnated into the Eldragon family itself, he was feeling pretty lucky. The nurses walked in with bottles holding some strange red liquid. When she gave the bottle to the goblin, it exploded into pieces. That's when Zeke realized his luck wasn't so good after all. The maid started feeding the red liquid to each baby. When it got to his turn, he panicked thinking he was about to go Allahu Akbar. The moment he tasted the drink, he recognized it. This red liquid is ancient dragon blood. His first instinct was to spit it out just like the other babies did, but he saw this as an opportunity to absorb this power straight from the source and get even stronger than he already was. Zeke drank the whole thing without leaving a single drop. After 7 years drinking this liquid, he managed to get way stronger. His body combined the divine power he already had with the power of dragon blood. This fusion got him to a level he never even imagined. All thanks to this drink, he took his whole life. By now, he must have reached at least 4 stars. A star is a compressed source of power. The more stars, the more strength. In his past life, he was the only one in the ranking who ever hit 10 stars. Ever since he was reborn, the only thing he knew was that his mom was dead and his dad never showed up. He also knew the world was still merciless. The dragon's approval ritual, only the babies who survive it are allowed to train as Dragon warriors. Zeke tries to learn about the family's combat training, but the maids won't say a word, so he decides to train on his own. He heads into the forest and eats poisonous herbs. He senses something nearby and spots a furious boar wrapped in a black mist, something that didn't exist 1,000 years ago. They clash, and he takes down the boar with a single heavy punch. What he didn't know is that a strange man was hiding nearby. After watching the fight, the man realized Zeke was no ordinary kid. Later, when Zeke gets home, he finds a group of warriors inviting him to an exam. His first reaction was to freak out, but he quickly agreed. He thought he was finally going to meet his main family, but instead they took him to the dragon's nest to be tested. Every kid born into the family has to enroll there at age 7, and today is the entrance exam. Even though he'd never trained a day in his life, a boy finds him crouched down and introduces himself as Rangus from Old Scale Village. At first, Zeke thinks Rangus is shy, but soon he notices the hidden courage behind the nervousness. Then Zeke introduces himself too. When he admits he has no idea what's going to be on the test, Rangus is surprised. Retin, also from Old Scale, shows up mocking the two of them. Like we already saw, the exam starts and everyone fails. Zeke walks up to the stone and cracks it with his bare hands. Everyone is shocked. Langus is stunned and thrilled at the same time. Nearby, the examiner narrows his eyes and wonders if the hero is an illegitimate child from some powerful house. After all, only 4 or 5-star warriors should be able to do something like that. As a reward, the hero receives a green potion, though he has no idea what it's worth. Later, Langus explains that it's a normal grade healing potion. Zeke wonders if it might be an elixir, a potion made from extremely rare ingredients. It uses special herbs, a pure elixir core, and parts from divine and phantom beasts that are almost impossible to find. The potion can heal old and new wounds while greatly boosting your ether. Since the ingredients are so scarce, it's very hard to make and almost never sold. Langus adds that the potions made by House Dragon are far better than the ones in normal shops. The hero is amazed while his friend keeps praising him. After that, the bullies pass too, and it's Langus' turn. He tries to scratch the rock with a sword but fails. Now he's down to his last try, and the bullies start tearing into him like they expected this from a half-dragon. Zeke tells him to use a spear instead of a sword since that weapon clearly doesn't fit him if he can't even make a dent with it. Everyone laughs at him for being so weak, but the hero helps his friend by making him switch to a spear. Langus's father was never allowed into Dragon's Nest, and people even mock him by calling him a half-dragon. His father was never accepted, but he still raised Langus without giving up. Now Langus wants to prove them all wrong. Still, he has no idea how to use a spear the right way. Zeke tells him to stop overthinking and just thrust straight ahead. For someone holding a spear for the first time, piercing the regeneration stone sounds impossible. Even so, MC says he shouldn't give up before trying. They only met today, but he trusts Langus completely, and that makes Langus want to trust him too. So he doesn't hesitate and drives the spear forward. The spear hits the stone, and somehow it feels natural, like it had always belonged in his hands. To everyone's shock, he does more than leave a scratch. He punches the spear right through the stone. Zeke is thrilled and cheers for him at the top of his lungs. That is how Langus passes the exam even though he barely believed he could do it. Tears of joy run down his face. Meanwhile, the bullies go quiet and tense up. With the test finished, the entrance ceremony begins. Zeke wonders if that was the only test, but Langus says there may be another one after the ceremony. Then the head of the Eldragon family steps forward to give the new students a few words. The protagonist points out how gloomy the family head looks, and Langus quickly tries to hush him. Zeke sizes up the Eldragon family's fighters and notices several at the 6-star level, making them a pretty solid force. The family head, Balza Eldragon, seems to be around 8-star. A fighter at that level was incredibly rare even 1,000 years ago. MC also seems to carry some hatred toward his father. Then Balza begins to speak, telling them they should become true flesh and blood of Eldragon. His presence alone is overwhelming, and most of the students can barely breathe under the pressure. Even Zeke realizes he can't endure it for long. Right then, an elderly dragon cuts in and praises the Lord's kind words, saying it's really just a matter of phrasing. That eases the tension and lets everyone breathe again. Soon after, a warrior announces the dorm assignments and tells each named student to move right away. Zeke asks if they will all be separated, and Langus explains that Dragon's Nest has 4 dorms. Students who enter the building are placed in one of 4 dorms, east, west, north, or south. He gets assigned to the east dorm. Inside, he wanders around for a while, trying to find his room until he finally does. When he arrives, he greets his roommate, and to his surprise, it's Ling Shi. The two are both happy about it. Zeke has nothing planned for the day, and Ling Shi tells him training starts tomorrow. Since the protagonist missed that part and wasn't listening to the announcements, Ling Shi scolds him for it. MC had actually been thinking about leaving this boring place and going on a trip, but the regeneration stone, the healing potion, and the alert have made things interesting enough that staying with House Eldragon a bit longer doesn't sound so bad. A month passes. During training, the students are taught Dragon's Breath, a method created by the 15th head of House Eldragon. Some students already know it well, including Laika, who seems to be around 2-star. Then there's Zeke, showing amazing skill with no formal teaching, making the trainer wonder if he inherited the head's talent. He realizes Dragon's Breath was originally his Dragon King's Breath, changed and passed down over time. The technique pulls ether from the air into the body and refines it, helping build up a person's ether. How strong it becomes depends on the user's skill. That's why each noble house improves its own version and keeps the finished method secret. Still, this version only works while standing still, so it's useless to Zeke. His old Dragon King's breath worked even while moving and was far more powerful, though very few could master it. He had simplified that method to strengthen his clan, never expecting it to survive and change even after his reincarnation. Later at dinner, the protagonist tells Langus to eat up if he wants to get stronger. Since he's still weak, he needs to train even harder. While MC is thinking about how well trained some of the others are, Laika cuts in and says he was amazing earlier. Laika instantly gets nervous and tells him she's the head's daughter. Totally unfazed, Zeke replies that he's the head's son too. He keeps casually answering Laika's questions while still telling Laika to stop spacing out and eat. That only makes Laika more interested, and she asks him to become her subordinate. She says that, as an illegitimate child, he needs allies. Her plan is for him to help her become the next head, and she promises a big reward in return, but Zeke calmly turns her down. She even tries tempting him with the head's potions, but he still refuses. Laika can already project ether outside her body, which is impressive for someone her age. He bluntly tells her he has no interest in becoming head and won't serve anyone because he sees himself as the strongest. So Laika challenges him to a fight and everyone heads to the training ground to watch. Zeke realizes this got serious fast, while Langus warns him that she's not only Bowser's daughter, but also tied to Typhon of Blood, one of the 4 great houses supporting Eldragon. Like the other heirs, she's a genius, and by age 7, she had already mastered every form of her house. That is all new to the protagonist since he only knew her as the head's daughter. Even so, he stays confident. If anything, knowing less makes him more excited. Langus keeps warning that he has no chance against Laika, but both fighters are ready, and Zeke asks why she's so set on fighting him. Laika says she wants to become the next head, and beating him will help her claim that seat and make him serve under her. When MC seems lost about his own family, Laika asks if it's because he was born illegitimate, then explains that there are 5 heirs competing to become the next head. All the others carry blood from one of Eldragon's 4 great houses. He doesn't, so she wants to crush him now and secure her place. With that, Laika swings her huge sword like it weighs nothing, but Zeke slips past the attack with ease. Her attacks keep coming faster and faster, showing everyone what it means to be the head's child. Laika keeps pressing, yet he dodges every strike without much effort. Even Langus is stunned. Zeke praises her style, but she pushes him to stop playing around, so he finally throws a punch and knocks her down. Laika can't understand why she hasn't landed one clean hit. The protagonist admits she's faster than most 1-stars he's seen, but she's still only a 1-star in the end. He explains that he watched her breathing, the twitch of her muscles, and even her eyes to read her next move. The rest, he says, comes down to experience. Laika refuses to quit and charges again, only to get slammed back down. Zeke is impressed that she gathered true source power in her core well enough to endure that hit. When Langus tries to step in, MC tells him to stay back. Then Laika breaks through to 2-star, something everyone can feel from her aura. At that level, true source power can be projected outside the body for combat, and that projection is called aura. Laika says Zeke is the reason she broke through, but now he has no chance against her. She immediately throws a quick heavy strike, and this time he can't dodge it completely. Now he's up against a very different version of the true Thunder Spirit Great Sword Arts, and that only makes him more excited. Laika follows with her Thunder Grade move, Thunderlight Flash Strike. At first, Zeke enjoys the challenge, but he soon realizes her new level is a real problem. Handling that much lightning in his current state won't be easy. Just 1 star of difference changes everything between them. Her movements are still simple, but after reaching 2-star, the Thunder Spirit Greatsword Arts explode with power. She was fast before. Now she's even faster. The strangest part is the lightning wrapping around her body, something that wasn't possible 1,000 years ago. Zeke can't counter yet because he doesn't fully understand that power, but he still keeps smiling. That smile annoys Laika more than anything, so she keeps raining lightning attacks on him. Even then, the protagonist stays on his feet. As Ling Shi watches in growing panic, Laika offers to stop if MC surrenders and swears loyalty to her. He refuses, so she says she'll use everything she has to finish this. Then she unleashes the first secret art of the Thunder Spirit, Heavenly Thunder. Zeke is blasted to the ground and left motionless. The match is called over, but to everyone's shock, he stands back up while sparks crackle around him. Laika can only stare in confusion. Zeke explains that he was taking her hits on purpose to study them, and now he can use that power too. While enduring those attacks, He kept using Dragon King's breath, which reacted to her lightning and started creating electricity inside his body. Without meaning to, he learned how to control it himself. He doesn't understand all of it yet, but he believes her clan has a special constitution. By mixing both techniques, he gained a huge insight. Thanks to Laika, he also reached 2-star, so the fight is far from over. Zeke is starting to grasp this strange new power while Lingshi watches, shaken by the true strength of the head's bloodline. Now even Laika's lightning strikes can't reach him. The battle goes on for a while until Zeke decides to finish it with a new form of his own. As Laika hesitates for a moment, he makes his move and uses that special form, Dragon Slaying Arts, to drop her in a single blow. The fight leaves everyone amazed, and Laika can hardly believe she lost. She still has to surpass her brothers if she wants to become the next head. Zeke just smiles and praises how skilled she is. He even tells her to keep learning because this won't be the last time they fight. The protagonist offers her a rematch someday, and Laika starts to see him as someone she may never be able to beat. A few hours pass inside the fissure. Lord Balza is holding back as he works on the first form of dragon combat arts. Then a report cuts in. His daughter has reached 2-star. That's impressive for her age, and by graduation, she could hit 4-star or even 5-star. Balza barely reacts. He tells them not to waste his time and to come back when she can truly use that gift. Then the soldier adds that she was just defeated. The one who beat her was Balza's own son, Zeke. Now Balza starts to get it because MC's mother had natural talent in battle too, though she died before he was born. What puzzles him is who could have taught him enough to beat a 2-star fighter, but he's told that Zeke reached this level entirely on his own. Hearing that, Balza orders the first trial to begin early. It's far ahead of schedule, and most students haven't even reached 1-star yet. Balza says that makes no difference. Trained or not, everyone faces the same test. Anyone who can't survive the first trial has no future, and he calls them unworthy of Eldragon. He also orders Freya to return and take charge of the trial, making sure she watches everything closely. The next day, normal dragon combat training starts again. Zeke is practicing Ibuki Dragon's Breath, a combat art created by the 15th generation. But really, it's a body-strengthening method made simple enough for kids to learn. Langus asks why the protagonist isn't still training it, but the protagonist has already mastered it. Langus is shocked since they only learned it a few hours earlier. Zeke tells him to turn around and opens a channel to pass his energy through. Langus is amazed and starts thinking this kind of training must feel dull to MC now that he already beat Laika. After that fight, his bond with the Dragon Slayer combat style and its spatial form has grown even stronger. He believes there may be a final form strong enough to kill even a divine dragon, and the protagonist wants to learn how these dragon arts really work. Since he has already mastered the dragon combat arts, Zeke goes back to basic physical training. A little later, Lengus asks him for help training because he wants to get stronger, and MC agrees, seeing real potential in his friend. Before long, Laika asks Zeke to train her too. The way he crushed her earlier made her want to grow stronger, strong enough to shock her brother and even him. The protagonist agrees, but asks if she's really okay. Her injuries should have left her bedridden for a month. She says a healing potion fixed that. Without it, she really would have been stuck in bed for weeks. Still, Laika checks again, asking if he's sure he wants to spend time training her instead of himself. MC is ready to guide both of them. Later, he asks Laika if she's truly fine learning from the one who beat her. She says she'll do whatever it takes to get stronger and become the next leader. Zeke asks why that role matters so much to her, and she explains that if she fails to claim it, her family's rules say she'll be married off. Best case, it's a cousin. Worst case, a complete stranger. That makes him furious. He hates seeing people treated like breeding tools. Soon after, an announcement is made about a new instructor arriving. They're told she came despite her busy schedule, so everyone should be thankful. Freya arrives and immediately notices Laika's sharp reflexes and steady aura. She's introduced as Freya Windkick of the Black Dragon Corps. After greeting the students, she spots Zeke and asks why he doesn't seem surprised. The protagonist calmly says there's nothing surprising about it and brings up her unusual skill. That makes Freya see why the clan head is so interested in this boy. Zeke studies her martial art too. She moves so quietly. Even her boots make no sound. Later, Freya tells everyone they need to pass her test. Each student must take a crystal orb and survive for 1 month on Poisonous Dragon Mountain. The place is full of venomous beasts, and even touching a poisonous weed can kill you right away. MC remembers training there in his past life. If a student's orb breaks or disappears, that student is disqualified and expelled from the academy on the spot. Freya tells them to use Dragon's Breath to control their breathing. As long as the orb stays safe, they have a chance. As for monsters, she says they'd better kill them. Otherwise, they won't have food for the month. The students still have 5 days left. During that time, each one can pick one basic Eldragon martial art to learn, and having a fighting style will make survival much easier. But if someone fails to improve in those 5 days, Freya says that's not her problem. Some of the kids innocently ask if she'll help them when they're in danger, but this is the Eldragon way. Only the strong live. If someone can't win, they die. The students panic, while Zeke wonders if this family has really changed that much. Then Freya hands out a manual for each weapon. Langus can't decide what to choose, so he tells him to pick a spear, the same weapon he used in the earlier test. He also recommends an axe for Laika since it would cover her weak points. After that, Freya tells them to train like their lives depend on it, because they do. She also warns them that upperclassmen will try to steal their orbs during the test. Still, the forest is huge, so running into them won't happen often. Even so, fear spreads through the students. Zeke tells them to make teams if they can't handle the trial alone, but he plans to go by himself. Then he casually invites them to eat before training. 5 days later, it's finally time for the test, and everyone gathers to enter. Langus nervously says the moment has come, and Laika agrees with a quiet nod. He wonders if it's really okay for him to stand beside her and mutters that the others are nobles while he's just a commoner. The others step in and remind him he belongs there just as much as they do. Seelen joins in, saying she still can't believe they're working with Laika.
Laika answers calmly.
There's nothing strange about it. They were all chosen for their ability. Langus grips his rod tighter and promises to give it everything he has, and Raymond says he'll meet her expectations. Laika smiles and says she's counting on them, then asks Zeke if he's really going solo. He confidently says yes. The others look uneasy, and Laika admits she's nervous too. The protagonist raises a brow and says everyone there has talent. She asks if he really means that, and he tells her she and the others are good enough that their test should be easy. Lengus quietly notes that Zeke is always confident. Then the new instructor steps up and gets everyone's attention, looking over them carefully. She approves of how they formed groups and says teamwork will keep them alive. Next, she asks for their crystal orbs and explains that each person must guard their own for the full month on Poisonous Dragon Mountain since every orb looks the same. MC wonders if that means a lost orb could just be swapped out. Freya goes on, saying upperclassmen on the mountain will try to steal those orbs. One student asks what happens if some of them haven't reached 1 star yet, while another says the task sounds easy. Freya cuts that off and orders the exam to begin. The students rush toward the mountain. Laika tells Zeke she'll see him again after the exam, then orders her team forward. He gives a calm wave, and Freya asks if he isn't nervous. With a faint smile, he says he's fine and heads in, leaving Freya watching him with quiet interest. That night, an officer beside Freya asks if the exam is too harsh for the students. Another agrees, saying they still lack real combat experience and wondering how many will make it through. Freya says the mountain's monsters aren't that strong, and teamwork should keep them alive. The officer agrees, then hears Freya mutter about releasing something. He asks what she means, but she brushes it off. After that, she orders another group into the jungle. As a team moves deeper in and spots a student by himself, one archer fires at once, but Zeke catches the arrow with ease and smirks. They stare in shock, muttering to each other. But before they can do anything, the protagonist rushes in and signals that the real game starts now. Selene smashes through the monsters with full force, and when another one jumps in from behind, Raymond steps up with his shield and cuts it down. Lannis charges with his spear and pierces another monster. Laika praises the team, and when they look her way, they're stunned by how many frog monsters she already killed on her own. She laughs and says being 2-star definitely helps. Then she adds that both Raymond and Seelen reached 1 star during the week, while Lannis lowers his head until the others encourage him, saying his star will come soon. Laika agrees and says beating a frog monster without a star is already a big deal, especially with the clean spear work Lannis learned from Zeke. Then she tells them to head back before dark. As they get close to camp, Laika suddenly stops when she sees a senior waiting for them. The senior grins, and Laika asks if he came to steal their orbs. The group goes tense as Raymond raises his shield. The senior admits that's the point of the test and says he didn't expect to find her team first. Laika warns him to leave before they kill him. There's no way he can take them alone. But before she moves, 3 more seniors appear behind them. The leader draws his sword and swings at her, ordering her to surrender. She dodges and the others charge in. Raymond blocks the attacks. Seelan fights back with brute force, while Lannis struggles to hold on as his enemy demands the crystal. Then Lannis remembers what Zeke told him when he asked how to face a stronger enemy. MC had said Zeke couldn't beat 3 or more upperclassmen head-on, but there was still a way. Lannis had asked what it was, and he told him to wait for an opening. When Lannis asked how to spot one, Zeke said to endure, keep watching, and force the enemy to reveal it. A weaker fighter can't create that opening alone. Lannis had balled up his fists and asked if he could really hold out that long. The protagonist told him that lasting longer is how you win, that beating someone stronger with patience matters more than raw power. The only one who might break that rule was Laika. Zeke told him to trust himself, stop overthinking, and wait for the right moment to strike. Now Lannis grits his teeth and stays in the fight. Then his enemy drops his guard for just a second. Lannis rushes in. His spear drives straight through the senior. At the same time, Laika keeps fighting her own opponent, and he soon realizes she's stronger than him, even though they're both 2-star. She knows that edge came from Zeke's advice. With one clean blow, she ends it. Laika hurries back to her team and checks if everyone is okay. They cheer, and Celine praises Lannis. He's just reached 1 star, and he can barely believe it. Laika smiles and says that now everyone has a star. They can make it through the exam. Then she wonders what Zeke is doing right now. Far away, a girl from the last group runs in terror. Shaking, she asks what kind of monster he is. Her teammates are down around him, and MC stands in the middle of them. The upperclassmen scatter, screaming as they run for their lives. They think they've met a real monster. Zeke took them down with ease, and now he's just standing there calm. He even calls them cowards for running. The hunters have become the hunted, and they're sprinting away from a first year they thought would be easy prey. One upperclassman slips and crashes to the ground. It feels like a nightmare when he looks up at him. Zeke coldly tells him to get up and at least try to fight. One look from those golden eyes is enough to break the kid's nerve. The poor guy faints from fear on the spot. The protagonist is almost disappointed by how easily he crushed them, especially after they came at him acting tough. Then he notices someone watching from hiding. Zeke tells the person to come out, and when they don't, he decides that means he can do as he likes. The spy is Ion, a captain from the Upper Dragons. He's stunned that a first-year beat so many upperclassmen and even caught him spying. Interested, Ion decides to report everything to his leader. He goes back to the scarlet-haired woman who asks for his report. Her men begin with the exam results so far. After 1 week, 32% of the students have dropped out. Still, the survivors are adapting fast, so they don't expect that number to fall much more. But when she asks about the upperclassmen, everything changes. Her men pause, unsure how to answer. Then the observer explains that the upperclassmen are the ones running for their lives. The instructor is stunned by that answer. It makes no sense. Nothing on the mountain should threaten upperclassmen like that. Then he gives the reason in one name, Zeke. He's become a disaster for them, hunting them down one by one. No one wants to go near him now. He keeps cutting them down, and this whole situation is unlike anything they've seen before. As they talk about MC, even being the Patriarch's son doesn't cover it. The kid is far beyond a normal prodigy. The instructor remembers her strange first meeting with him. Now she realizes his plan from the start was to move alone because he intended to be the one hunting. He was never worried about being chased. He wanted to do the chasing, and that blunt praise for Zeke catches everyone's attention. Then something they were waiting for finally arrives, and Freya orders the workers to unload it there. The others question her again as she raises the exam's danger even more by planning to release a 3-star monster, something even upperclassmen shouldn't handle easily. Freya calmly says she already made adjustments. The creature will only target students at 2-star level or higher, so anyone with 1 star or none should be safe. When asked why she's doing this, Freya reveals it's a direct order from Lord Eldragon, the family head. She's curious how this exam will end, especially when it comes to the monster Zeke has become. Wanting to see if he can handle something like this, Freya tells them to release the creature at dawn. By dawn, it begins. Lengus and Salam feel the ground shaking right away. Laika's instincts tell her something worse than the upperclassman is coming. Laika's first guess is it's just a huge monster, but Laika knows it's something far more dangerous. As the rumbling grows, the students start to panic. Laika spots a tree falling behind them and yells for everyone to move. She shields Seelan, and Raymond protects Lengus, keeping them all from getting hurt. Shaken but ready, Laika grips her sword and faces the threat. Lengus and the others can only stare in fear. What stands before them is a giant stone golem, something they never expected to find on this mountain. Elsewhere, Zeke sits on a pile of monster corpses and unconscious upperclassmen, looking completely bored. He's so far above everyone else in this exam that no one can challenge him. Then he senses something dangerous in the distance, not a normal monster, but something above the 2-star level, and wonders what the instructor is planning. Using a creature like that against students who are only around 2-star is strange. Freya should have warned them about it from the start. Then Zeke figures out she released it on purpose and starts wondering why. Still, to him, this is the perfect cure for boredom. So he jumps down from his pile of victims and heads for the 3-star monster even though it's far from where he is. Back at the golem fight, Seelan swings her sword at it. The blade does nothing against its stone body. Then Raymond steps in. He slams it with his shield, but that also leaves no mark. Finally, Laika makes her move. She unleashes her lightning technique, Thunder Flash. Even that powerful strike only chips the golem a little. That tells her only aura-filled attacks can break its outer shell, which means the others can't really hurt it. Langus asks for a plan, and Laika quickly gives one. She'll act as bait and hold the monster off so the others can escape, but no one wants to leave her behind. Laika snaps that they'd only get in her way. If her strongest aura attack barely worked, then the rest of them won't do much at all. She isn't wrong, but Raymond still steps forward and says he'll back her up so she can keep attacking. Laika thinks he's being reckless. Even so, Langus and Seelan also choose to support her however they can. Their resolve changes her mind, and she tells them to cover her while she prepares the next strike. Laika gathers her power, then she bursts forward in a flash of thunder. The golem reacts fast and swings to crush her into the ground. Raymond blocks the blow just in time. Even blocking one hit leaves his whole body shaking. While he recovers, Langus and Salon jump in and keep the golem busy with non-stop attacks. That opening lets Laika leap in from behind with a slash from above. She activates her Thunder Spirit Greatsword art, then she pounds the giant with Divine Thunder. Lightning tears through the air as the attack lands. When it's over, the monster seems gone. Langus rushes to Laika as she stumbles, drained from using her final move. She thinks they won, and she's just relieved Raymond and the others are safe, but they're wrong. The golem suddenly comes through the smoke and reaches for the defenseless Laika. It grabs her, and her friends can't stop it. Laika realizes she made a huge mistake by not making sure it was dead. Seelan is horrified that the monster is still moving after taking that attack. Lengus charges in with his spear to save her, but the golem easily knocks Laika away from his reach. Lengus cries out in panic, then a massive tree suddenly comes flying down from above toward the golem. The impact smashes into the monster and frees Laika from its grip. Langus and the others pull her out of danger, still not knowing what just happened. Then Zeke arrives. He barely even looks at his friends. His attention is already on his next target. Earlier, he had seen Laika's huge finishing attack from far away. He knew her group was trying to bring the monster down, but he was too far away to reach them in time. Laika's team is strong, but a 3-star monster is too much for them. At this point, they're just trying to stay alive before they get wiped out. Realizing he couldn't make it in time on foot, Zeke decided to try something new. He dug his fingers into a tree's core, then ripped the whole thing out of the ground with crazy strength for a kid. After that, the protagonist hurled the tree as far as he could. He hoped it would fly like a missile and hit the monster. Zeke was pretty pleased since this wasn't just random tree throwing. Came from something bigger. He starts talking about dragon nurturing arts. Before the exam, students get the L-Dragon Combat Manual. It's not a full fighting style, just a guide that helps them draw out their power better. It worked well for MC because in his past life he was used to fighting with long-range attacks as the first head of Aeon. Once he threw the tree, he started running again. Back in the present, he meets up with his friends, and they're stunned to see him there. Lengus warns him the golem is coming to kill them all. Zeke doesn't run. He looks excited to fight it instead. What catches his attention is that the monster has a presence, but no life force at all. As he's talking, the 3-star giant throws a heavy punch straight at him. It lands on the protagonist head-on, but then comes the shock. MC stops it with one hand. From that single clash, he figures out normal attacks won't do much. He could destroy it with aura, but he doesn't want the fight to end that fast. Laika can only watch as he plays around with the same monster her group struggled against. Ion tries to crush him with both hands, and Zeke notes how fast it is for something that huge. He blocks the slam anyway, though it does sting a little. He tells the others to stay back before they get hurt, so they retreat from the area. Now free to cut loose, Zeke shifts his stance and throws a monster 10 times his size. Even so, its shell is still a problem, and he starts wondering if it's just as tough on the inside. To find out, he charges up a punch and slams it into the golem at blazing speed. It's the first form of the Dragon Destroyer combat arts mixed with a second style burst that wrecks the golem from within. The move doesn't just break the outside, crushes the inside too. Just like that, the protagonist drops it in one hit and actually enjoys himself a little. A month after the exam, we move to the Eldragon family's main estate. There, Zeke gets summoned, and he's clearly not happy about it. On the way, he thinks back on the exam. After the golem fight, nothing major happened. By the end, the group of 7-year-olds had been cut down to 70, but the survivors got used to death and reached the 1-star level. Not long after the test, MC was called in to meet the Patriarch, his father. As they walk down the hall, Zeke grumbles while Freya warns him to show the Patriarch proper respect. She keeps going on about how he acted during the exam and says he basically brought trouble on himself. He still has no clue what she's talking about. He thinks he did nothing wrong. Then Freya snaps and reminds him he wrecked the upperclassmen's exam by attacking and hunting them down when he didn't need to. Because of that, not one upperclassman got an orb, and all of them have to retake the test. Fed up, Freya begs him one more time to fix his tone before meeting the family head. At last, they reach the Patriarch's door. Freya keeps telling him to stay humble because if he doesn't, he could really be erased. Lord Eldragon is ruthless and doesn't care about children, and Freya is scared Zeke might be killed. Even he gets a little shaken hearing that. Before going in, Freya announces her rank and purpose. He gives permission to enter, so the two of them step inside. The protagonist looks at the man behind the desk, his first time facing the head of the family. Lord Eldragon already seems slightly irritated, and instead of greeting them, he demands to know why Zeke attacked the upperclassmen. MC answers without a care, asking if he actually broke any rules by fighting them. That reply catches the Patriarch off guard. He keeps pushing. The only rule, he says, was to survive 1 month while protecting the crystal orb. Nothing else was stated, so he followed the test exactly. And if there were other rules, his father should have said them before it started. Freya's expression says it all. She's terrified, especially after warning him not to argue. She tries to calm him down, but his father releases a dark, crushing aura that freezes her in place. The pressure alone is enough to force her to the floor. Freya is sure Zeke is about to be killed. Instead, he feels nothing and mocks his father again for using cheap pressure the second he gets annoyed. The Patriarch is stunned that the protagonist isn't affected at all. Then he asks how this boy beat a whole group of upperclassmen and even a 3-star golem. As if that weren't enough, this 7-year-old also pushed through his overwhelming aura. To him, it makes no sense that a child could have this kind of power. Zeke realizes the real question is where his strength comes from, and instead of giving a real answer, he just calls it his own genius. Pride meets pride as father and son stare each other down. Lord Eldragon admits the reports were right about MC's reckless attitude, but that part doesn't matter now. He still beat a golem, so he offers a reward, 1 item from the Dragon Treasury or access to the 2nd floor of the Dragon Hall. What shocks Freya most is how he went from nearly killing his son to rewarding him instead. Both choices are huge. The Dragon Hall and Dragon Treasury have 1,000 years of things gathered since Jilfa's time, including books, even ones banned today. They also hold top-class weapons, artifacts, and just about anything a person could need. These places are the family's greatest vaults, guarded so tightly that only a few students ever get in. The Dragon Hall's 2nd floor is even harder to reach and only opens for major achievements. Freya can't believe it. Zeke acts like a brat and still gets rewarded. Then he pushes his luck and asks for both. Lord Eldragon tells him to leave, but he ignores the order and says he still has more to ask. Freya knows his mouth is going to get him killed, so she grabs him and tries to drag him out fast. At this point, she looks more like a worried mom than an instructor. But even while being pulled away, Zeke gets in one last shot. He tells his father that the more he forces down his emotions, the farther he'll get from becoming the strongest. In that instant, Lord Eldragon senses the protagonist's potential and realizes this boy could one day stand equal to him. Freya shuts him up and takes him away, leaving Lord Eldragon thinking about the presence he just felt. In the next scene, Freya is ranting again, yelling at him for disrespecting the leader after all her warnings. MC says he really did try but gave up. Funny enough, this was him holding back, which says a lot about what he could have said. Freya can't understand why he respects his teachers, but not his own father. When she thinks about his strength and his rough personality, Freya starts to see Zeke as no normal child and even wonders who he really is. Just to mess with her, he says he's simply himself. Freya thinks about how everyone in their family drinks ancient dragon blood at birth. The family head carries the power of a superior dragon too. So by nature alone, no one should be able to stand against his wrath. And yet Zeke not only challenged his father, he stood his ground. Freya can't make sense of him, so she decides to check his birth records. For now though, she changes the subject and asks which reward he'll take. The protagonist puts on a cute face and says he wants both, annoying Freya all over again. In the end, MC makes his choice. He's after knowledge. Since he reincarnated 1,000 years into the future, he knows he's behind on this era. He wants to learn how medicine and technology have changed. Meanwhile, Langus is thrilled that he gets to enter the Dragon Hall. Both of them are excited. The thing is, Langus already learned dragon slaying and nurturing spear arts, but this gives him a chance to study another martial art too. Laika joins them and says they need to hurry because they also have a time limit. The first floor is only for basic level books, and they can borrow just one at a time, so they have to choose carefully. At the same time, Laika hears that Zeke was allowed to choose between the treasury and the hall. She's surprised he picked the Dragon Hall instead of a weapon or something like that. Normally, he probably would have, but he's too far behind on the current era's knowledge. The second floor is the real prize. Its books are even rarer than the first floors, and only the protagonist can go there. Even so, Laika thinks nothing in that library can top her Thunderclap greatsword arts. While she's praising herself, MC tunes out. In the next scene, the supervisor tells them they only have 5 hours for the visit, and it's hard to say if that's actually a long time. Laika suggests a simple plan. Borrow the one book they want most, then spend the rest of the time reading the books they can't take out. That helps fast readers the most, while Langus plans to focus on one martial arts book for 3 hours. Picking the right book for each person isn't easy, especially in a library this huge. Once they're teleported inside, everyone gets excited by how amazing the place is. For Zeke, it's way beyond anything he expected. He immediately starts looking for a book that could truly surprise him, then the reading begins. The second he gets his hands on the books, he goes all in. He tears through everything about magic and chaos. There's no way he can walk away from information this important. 1,000 years changed the world in a huge way. During that time, his world became connected to another one. About 900 years ago, a massive crack tore through reality and formed a dimensional wall called a rift. From it came a chaotic otherworld known as Kansai. That realm was filled with monsters born from chaos. To fight back, people in Zeke's world developed primal energy in their bodies, and the Eldragon family helped humanity hold the line. Fighting together also brought families closer. For great warriors married into the Eldragon house, creating the Tefana, Fafwild, Levius, and Bahamut lines. Now they're known as the 4 great Eldragon families, and that finally makes sense to the protagonist. That explains why the Anger Boar MC fought was wrapped in dark energy, and why Laika's Thunder Aura gives off something similar. It all came from another dimension. But what grabs Zeke most is how magic changed. Once that dark world connected to theirs, a whole new kind of technique appeared. The problem is he can't find a book that explains that technique even though something this important should be recorded in history. He gets so excited that the supervisor notices and tells him to stay quiet while reading. The weirdest part is that he hears a voice even though no one is near him. That makes him wonder if this is the same new technique. Maybe it can be used through sound or speech. But beyond normal primal energy, he still can't tell what makes it different. Then all his books suddenly rise into the air, glowing yellow as they float away on their own, and the protagonist can't hide his shock. He's fascinated by the technique, but the supervisor tells him again to be quiet. Zeke is too thrilled by this new path to calm down. And before he knows it, the library reacts to him. Threads of ether wrap around him and throw him right out the door. Zeke barely lands on his feet and wonders what just happened. Instead of backing off, he demands the supervisor use that ether technique again. Even Lang has no idea what's wrong with him. Laika is just as confused since he's the only one who got tossed out. At least Lang finds a martial arts manual worth borrowing, the Cloud Water Spear technique. Seelan picks up a movement skill along with the Wind Blossom Sword technique. Raymond also makes good use of the time, practicing the Eldragon Guardian Sword technique and grabbing a book for shield skills too. In the end, they're all learning martial arts Zeke created in his past life. After that, he turns to Laika to hear what she got. She says she found a book on the Heavy Wave Greatsword technique improved by the 15th Lord. This is the second time MC has heard about that 15th generation, so now he really wants to know what made him so special. Ion, the 15th Lord, also created the Dragon Slayer combat arts. Even though Zeke made many of the techniques that became famous in the hall, a lot of what survived were improved versions, which means the 15th Lord pushed them further. That's enough to impress even him. First, he thought school life would be boring. Now he's actually looking forward to what comes next. Then the story jumps ahead 5 years. Now 12, Laika looks for the protagonist and the others, and Langus tells her he's at the training grounds. Over there, Zeke is sparring against 3 of his friends. By age 12, he's grown much stronger. Balta is in his office when Black Dragon Corps Commander Ion arrives with urgent news. A rift has appeared. Their investigation says there's about an 80% chance it contains magic water, and Balzac quickly realizes the location makes that likely. Anyone who drinks that water can become a mage because the water itself turns into magic water. People who drink magic water gain a special body that can turn true source power into magic power. That discovery changed the world. At the same time, brutal land wars broke out over the source of that water, the magic springs. It became an age of magic where the number of mages strongly affects a house's military power. The problem is, Eldragon territory doesn't have a single magic spring. So if a house doesn't own a magic spring, there's only one way to get magic water: conquer a special rift. Right now, Eldragon has very few mages, and Balsa is one of them. Most got their power by conquering special rifts, but houses with magic springs still crush them with numbers. That's why taking rifts is Eldragon's top priority. Aon tells Balsa the rift appeared where he expected, but the dragon forest makes things messy. Not long ago, there was already a small border clash nearby. The abundant dragon forest mostly lies in Eldragon land, but part of it reaches into another house's territory. That rival is House Kerberos, which claims more of the forest and calls it the Abundant Hound Forest, and explains that most of the rift is inside Eldragon territory. But because of its size and position, the special zone around it might stretch into Kerberos land too. Knowing how Kerberos behaves, and is sure they'll rush in. Balza agrees. They'll definitely notice the rift. Balza tells, and they need to prepare for a territorial fight if it comes to that. Still, he wants Eldragon to act before Kerberos fully catches on. So Balza orders Ion to notify every dragon's nest that a selection trial will be held. Meanwhile, Zeke is on as the others charge at him all at once. And after reading their attacks, MC points out exactly what each of them is doing wrong. He tells Langas he's too stiff and that tension is weakening his spear technique. To Celine, he says she cares too much about speed and number of strikes, but her power isn't following through. She needs balance. Ramen gets some praise, but Zeke says he's still too defensive and needs to get used to attacking more. After breaking down their flaws, he tells them to come at him again. Turns out he does this all the time, and Laika is already used to how crazy it is. When he asks what's so crazy, Laika says his idea of taking attacks head-on without true source power is completely insane. Zeke fires back that this training has already made the group stronger without relying on true source power. Laika then asks if he can at least make them stop attacking while they're trying to talk, but Laika and the others are actually enjoying the protagonist's training. Laika tells the trio to stop calling MC a human because even the seniors call him the monster prodigy of the East Wing. He ignores her and asks if she wants to join in. Laika says she'd like to, but first she has something important to tell him. She warns him that they'll soon be meeting kids from the other dragons' nests. Langus is shocked, but Raymond stays calm since he figured this would happen eventually. Salon asks if it's for the next exam, and Laika says she doesn't know the details. Zeke asks how she even knows that, and Laika says you can tell just by watching the instructors. That makes the protagonist realize he never notices things like that, and Laika scolds him for acting badly for a future head candidate. Then Laika warns him to be careful because in the West Wing, there's another boy being raised as a candidate for head of the house. Zeke isn't worried at all. He just wants to see what that guy can do. A few days later, everyone gathers no matter their grade. Laika suspects it's because of what they talked about before. Soon, Freya and the instructors arrive and order the kids to stay quiet. She announces that starting now, for the next 3 days, they'll be fighting the children from the other dragons' nests. The students are stunned because this usually only happens during the graduation exam, yet they're doing it now. Freya says there are many reasons, but she can't explain everything. She only adds that anyone who survives the match will receive a special mission, and the second Zeke hears that, he lights up with excitement. Each of the 4 halls, East, West, South, and North, will send 7 fighters using a winner stays on format. Freya then tells them to choose their representatives. Later, the oldest students gather under Rick, who says the representative should come from their year since no one would object. Laika speaks up right away, arguing that the fighters should be picked by ability, not just age. Rick mocks Laika and says this is about strength while he keeps running his mouth, until Laika releases her aura. Rick and the others panic when they realize she's already 3-star. They thought she was still only 2-star. Laika tells them that if Rick wants to settle it with strength, she's ready. Laika asks if anyone on Rick's side is actually stronger than her. If not, she says they should open the picks to lower year students too. Rick snaps back that Laika is the only one worth anything and everyone else is trash. Zeke cuts him off and says Rick is way too loud. Rick whirls around and shouts, asking what he just said. Without backing down, MC repeats himself and asks if the upper years really think they can crush the lower years. Then he suggests a simple answer. Fight it out until only 7 people are left. Laika says that would be too brutal and proposes preliminaries instead, only for people who want to join. She calls for volunteers to step up. Rick accepts the idea, though he still calls it a waste of time. Laika asks Zeke if he's entering, and he says yes right away. He also wants Langus, Raymond, and Seelan to join him. That shocks the 3 of them. They'd be going against top-tier seniors. The protagonist tells them not to be scared. They've trained with him this whole time, so now it's time to prove it. From his tone alone, the trio can tell this isn't really a choice. They're joining the preliminaries. With Zeke and the trio in, Laika asks if anyone else wants to step forward. Most of the younger students hesitate because they don't think they can beat the top years. MC tells them that's exactly why they should fight. It's a chance to gain real experience. Even so, nobody seems moved. He then tells Laika that this is their chance to see how strong those so-called top-year students really are. The seniors, meanwhile, think only Laika has a real shot because everyone else is still just 2-star. Zeke glances back and sees his group looking nervous. He asks what's wrong, and Langus reminds him they're facing 3-star seniors. The protagonist says all the training they've done with him over the years has to count for something. He reminds them they've all improved a lot. They just need to trust themselves a little more. They're still scared, but they can't deny that Zeke has a point. Not long after, Rick yells for them to come over so he can teach them a lesson. A moment later, Rick's team is already down cold after Langus and the others beat them badly. MC likes what he sees and praises his squad. He notices Longius has gotten much better at parrying attacks and finding openings. Celine is also using the multi-strike Windflower sword style really well. Raymond earns praise too for smoothly switching between shield moves and swordplay. Even Laika has become seriously strong. Zeke knows that if they keep improving like this, it'll help them a lot. Rick can only stare in disbelief. He refuses to accept that a 3-star could lose to a 2-star. He calls him out, asking why he's still talking trash after seeing the result for himself. Pressuring Rick hard, the protagonist says age and star rank are only rough signs. In a real fight, the winner is the stronger one. If you're weak, you lose. Rick still won't accept it and insists that star ranks are what matter. Zeke answers that stars don't matter once someone's heart is crushed. They die all the same. Even with proof right in front of him, Rick refuses to admit MC is right. He shouts that he's a top student and no brat's clever talk will work on him. Rick says he was going to take it easy on him, but not anymore. The protagonist says he's tired of hearing him talk and tells him to stop yapping and move. Since they're the only ones left, Zeke says he wants to see what martial arts Rick has learned. That sets Rick off. Furious, he charges at MC and activates Great Strength Fist. He casually answers with one punch and sends him flying. Even after dropping him to the ground, the protagonist mocks him by saying he must have trained very hard. Meanwhile, at the West Training Grounds, Venel Fafnel-Deldragon, another candidate for the next head, is crushing everyone in sight. No one there can match his strength. After he finishes beating the other students, his aide, Alan, walks up and reports that the selection is done. One of the chosen fighters is a junior named Retin, and he's already 3-star. Venel praises him and says he likes capable people, so he's taking Retin in as a subordinate. Retin is thrilled to be recognized by Vanille. To him, as long as Vanille is there, the West Wing can't lose. Retin already sees Vanille as the next family head, certain they'll get great results on the mission. He's excited to serve the future head of the family. Then Alan says Vanille needs to hear something, and Vanille asks what it is. Alan leans in and tells him that Laika is on the East Wing team. Hearing that, Vanille grabs his head in frustration. Laika always seems to get in his way. Still, Vanille is sure his side will win no matter how gifted Laika is. He plans to win, clear the mission, and prove that the next head seat belongs to him. Soon, the students gather at the arena. Langus comments on how huge the crowd is. Laika explains that students from all 4 halls are here. She adds that a lot were cut during the exam already, so the total is much lower now. The ones who failed aren't here because they were labeled pseudo-dragons, just like Langus's father. Still, Laika tries to cheer him up. She tells him they were picked to represent the East Hall, and that's something to be proud of. Then they notice Zeke acting strangely and ask what's wrong. MC says he's just measuring the fighting strength of everyone in the arena. Langus is amazed, though he also knows that's normal for him. Right then, 2 upperclassmen chosen for the East Wing run over Rick and another girl. After the preliminaries, they ended up seeing things differently. Rick tells Zeke that he may be a lesser dragon, but he truly respects the strong. The protagonist casually accepts them. Looking around again, MC realizes every hall except the East is made up of 3-star students, and there aren't any 4 stars at all. Still, he can tell a lot of them have grown stronger. That only makes him more excited to see what kind of skills they'll show. Then a blonde girl named Sandy rushes over, hugs Laika, and calls her sister. Zeke is completely confused. Sandy clings to Laika and asks if anyone's been bothering her. Laika tells her she's fine. That forces Laika's group to ask who this girl is. Laika explains that she's her cousin, Sandy Toporna, daughter of the Toporna family head. When Langus and the others hear that, they're nearly stunned speechless. Toporna is one of the 4 great houses. Sandy rudely asks who Langs and the others are, and Laika says they're her teammates. Sandy says everyone needs friends, but then mocks Laika for hanging around a bunch of untalented trash. Zeke cuts in and says they'll find out soon enough whether they're talentless since they're all about to fight. Surprised, Sandy asks who he is, and Laika says he's a head candidate just like her. The moment she hears that, Sandy realizes the protagonist is the illegitimate child everyone's been talking about. She's shocked that an illegitimate child like him is still around, and Laika scolds her for being rude. Sandy can't believe it and reminds Laika that Zeke is her rival. Sandy keeps running her mouth, saying Langus and the others aren't even 3-star, so the East Hall must be weak. MC warns that one day she'll fall if she keeps looking down on people. That makes Sandy furious. She fires back that he is just an illegitimate child with nothing behind him except the head's bloodline. She can't believe the protagonist has the nerve to answer her back, and MC says it's only advice. Sandy is about to lose it when the North Hall representative Aegis Van Blade steps in. He tells Sandy not to start trouble with the other teams. Sandy gets annoyed that Aegis interrupted just when she was about to go off. Aegis says he had to step in because the selection match is about to start. A moment later, a crushing presence enters the arena. It's the Gold Dragon Order Captain, Teach Mentric, the Dread Educator. Mentric explains that the tournament will be a joint knockout between the 4 halls. First, the halls will be paired off and the winners will meet in the finals. He says every battle will be a 1-on-1 duel with fighters sent out one by one in an order each hall decides beforehand. Each hall has 7 fighters, and the first side to beat 4 opponents wins. Once the match starts, that order can't be changed, so he tells them to treat fighter order as part of their strategy. Then he adds that the students chosen here will also receive a special mission. Zeke hears that and breaks into a big smile. Mentric says the mission is very important to the Eldragon family, and anyone who takes it on will make a major contribution. Vanille and Laika both realize at once that this is a huge step toward becoming the next family head. After explaining the rules, Mentric says it's time to decide the matchups. He calls the representatives of each hall forward to draw 1 stone from the box. West Hall is called up first with Vanille as its representative. He draws a stone from the box, then he heads back. Laika's face shifts the second she spots Vanille. Zeke notices and asks if she knows him. She explains that Vanille is the West Hall candidate for the next family head, the one she mentioned before. That makes him even more curious. He can already tell Vanille and the rest of West Hall are packed with strong fighters. The other halls are trained well too, but West Hall feels like it's on another level. Zeke also spots Retin and remembers how skilled he was during the entrance exam. He smiles, figuring Retin must have trained like crazy to reach 3 stars so young. Meanwhile, some students in the stands mock Langus, calling him a loser and wondering why he was picked. Raymond notices the pressure and asks Langus if he's okay. Langus stammers a bit, then says he's fine. Next, North Hall steps forward. South Hall goes after them. At last, East Hall is called. Laika tells Zeke to represent them since he's their strongest fighter. The protagonist hesitates, saying this kind of thing should be left to the younger ones. Laika can't believe he's saying that when they're the same age, so MC drops it and accepts the role. Seeing that, Sandy nearly snaps and demands to know why he is going up. Laika calmly says it's because Zeke is the strongest. Sandy argues that's ridiculous since he isn't even 3 stars. She reminds Laika this whole thing is really her battle with Vanille over the next head position. Laika tells her sister to settle down. They're strong enough. Once every representative has their stone, Mentric tells them to pour ether into it. South Hall and West Hall get red stones, while East Hall and North Hall match together. So the first round is East Hall versus North Hall and West Hall versus South Hall. When Langus and the others hear they're facing North Hall, they panic because one of North Hall's fighters looks built like a tank, nothing like a student. Even Laika starts to worry. She's also uneasy because her first fight will be against Sandy. Meanwhile, Sandy is set on crushing Laika and reminding her where she belongs. Laika fires back that she won't back down, and the clash between the sisters keeps building. Aegis then tells Zeke he's looking forward to fighting him. The protagonist says he feels the same. As East Hall and North Hall get ready for their match, the other 2 halls stay seated and watch how it plays out. Rick is still pumped from training and promises Zeke they'll win this. Laika can tell Rick is nervous and quietly hopes he'll hold up. The opening match is Rick against a North Hall student. The duel starts. Rick attacks first while MC watches to see how it goes. Laika says this is looking rough and Zeke agrees. There are no sure things in competition. Then he says he's the exception because his win is certain. Laika stares at him, shocked, and reminds him nobody even asked. Dropping the bragging, the protagonist says North Hall's fighters don't outmatch Rick in raw power. He thinks Rick should win if he fights like usual, and Laika agrees. Laika points out it's their first time fighting before a huge crowd, so the pressure is worse. Zeke agrees but says Aegis and Sandy are different. He tells the team those 2 are already close to 4 stars, so stage pressure won't shake them. MC also figures Sandy fights a lot like Laika since they're cousins. A little later, the first match ends with North Hall taking the win. Seeing that, Marin panics because she has to win next. But Laika tells her not to worry, and it doesn't help because she loses too. Rick and Marin stand there ashamed, apologizing to Zeke, but he tells them not to stress. They just got swallowed by the arena's pressure. He says it would have been different on a real battlefield where lives were on the line. This arena, though, is for learning by testing your strength against others, not fighting to the death. He tells them this loss will become fuel for future battles if they keep pushing forward, and both of them shout their agreement. With 2 losses already, Zeke turns to Langus and reminds him the next match has to be a win. Langus nearly folds on the spot. He was already terrified, and that didn't help. To make it worse, his opponent is the giant he feared from the start. Langus jumps into the protagonist's arms crying, but the protagonist reminds him he fought upperclassmen during team selection too. Langus argues that none of them looked this scary. He can't believe he's supposed to beat someone like that in front of a huge crowd. MC realizes he has to steady him, so he pats Langus on the head and tells him to look at his opponent. Then he asks what kind of weapon the guy is using. Langus answers, a sword. Zeke tells him that's all he needs to think about. He's just facing someone with a sword. If the man thrusts, Langus has to knock it away. If the blade swings up, pull back. If it comes down, step in and thrust. In short, he tells him to answer the sword the same way he always has. That word, always, echoes in Langus's head, and he finally locks in. The protagonist is relieved. Langus has incredible focus. He just needed help finding it. Once he can do that on his own, he'll reach even greater heights. Zeke wonders how much this fight will help Langus grow. A moment later, Langus steps into the ring, tiny beside his giant opponent. The usual crowd starts laughing at Langus, saying he doesn't stand a chance, but Langus is fully focused now and dangerous. The instant the match starts, his opponent rushes in first with a piercing thrust. Langus reads it at once and slips past the attack, moving left without losing his cool. His opponent roars that he won't let Langus escape. He keeps throwing heavy swings to cut Langus down, but Langus dodges everyone. Seelan grows worried, realizing the giant is closing the distance Langus likes. Raymond anxiously asks MC if Langus will be okay, but MC tells them to stop worrying and look into Langus's eyes. Langus is completely focused. Then the giant leaps at him, but that's when Langus finally uses Cloudwater Spear. His spear spins fast enough to shut down the attack and open the way for a counter. Langus's strike lands cleanly, slamming into the giant's chest and blasting him away. The hit knocks him out cold. The instructor calls the match. Langus and Easthall take the win. Langus lets out a deep breath and silently thanks his luck. Zeke though is grinning because he knows it's time to swing things around. Langus' win gives Easthall the push they need, and they take the next 3 matches. By the 6th match, Sandy vs. Laika, the whole arena gets even tenser. They use the same Thunder Spirit and their sisters too. Before it starts, Sandy says she's shocked someone below 2 stars beat Northall's 3-star fighters. Laika reminds her she already said Easthall was strong. Sandy admits she underestimated them. Still, she says that's not what matters to her. What really catches Sandy's attention is that Laika isn't leading Easthall. She says Laika put herself in a bad spot by standing behind Zeke. Laika says she knows that. Even so, she hasn't given up on becoming family head. Pointing her sword at Sandy, Laika says she's sure she can win. Sandy decides to show her who's in charge. In a flash, Sandy disappears and reappears behind Laika. She nearly lands the blow, but Laika blocks it just in time. The 2 trade sword strikes, but Sandy has the upper hand and drives Laika back. Aegis isn't surprised at all. He just wants to see how long Sandy can keep this up. Laika keeps getting overwhelmed and even takes a cut on the arm. She has to jump back just to catch her breath under Sandy's non-stop pressure. Laika's teammates are worried by how strong Sandy is, and Raymond points out that Sandy trained Laika when they were younger. Sandy keeps circling her, scolding Laika for still swinging wildly whenever she's cornered. Laika rushes in with lightning flash slash, but Sandy crushes it with scattered thunder. Laika cries out and drops to her knees. Sandy tells her to give up. At this level, Laika can't beat her. Inside, Sandy is furious that she never pushed her father to bring Laika into North Hall. Even with defeat right in front of her, Laika still forces herself back up. Since her sister won't stay down, Sandy decides it's time to punish her. She slashes Laika again and again, then jumps up to finish the fight with one last strike. Langus and the others freak out and call for Zeke, but he stays calm and says Laika is about to break out of her shell again. Sandy's heavy blow comes down on Laika, smashing the ground and kicking up a huge cloud of dust. Seeing that, everyone thinks the match is over. Then Laika suddenly steps out of the dust. She's badly hurt but still standing. Smiling, she tells Sandy she finally understands her Thunder Spirit greatsword. Sandy is stunned. That attack was meant to end the match, so she can't understand how Laika survived.
Laika agrees.
Her old self would have fallen to that strike, but she's trained for 5 years too and says this fight is only getting started. Before the match, Laika spoke with Zeke. He noticed she was nervous and asked what was wrong. She reminded him that Sandy is her sister and the one who taught her, while her uncle, the current head of the Torpina family, gave her the basics. Whenever Laika got stuck, Sandy was always the one who helped her, so she was basically her mentor. To make it worse, Laika has never beaten Sandy even once. Even after getting much stronger over the last 5 years, she knows Sandy has grown too. She acted confident earlier, but deep down, she isn't sure she can win. Zeke tells Laika to think back on all the training they did together and remember every day of those 5 years. The second Laika hears that, her face drops so hard that the protagonist asks if it was really that awful. MC explains that when her emotions take over, her vision narrows and she stops seeing clearly. He says those 5 years were meant to teach her how to stay calm in battle. Still looking grossed out, Laika reminds him he never went easy on her. Zeke calls that his charm, and Laika can't believe he'd say that when all she remembers is pain. Even so, he says the training worked and she should now be able to watch her enemy calmly in a fight. Laika agrees, but says the real question is whether that will help against Sandy. The protagonist tells her she'll understand once the match starts. He says her gift for reading an opponent's movements will show her what that training really changed. Of course, Zeke still brags a little since she was trained by the strongest, meaning him she'll be fine. That short talk helps Laika calm down a bit. Since Sandy uses Thunderclap too, MC says this is the perfect chance for Laika to study her sister's Thunderclap great sword art closely. If she does, she'll come out even stronger. Back in the present, Laika tells Sandy she saw everything clearly and that Thunderclap greatsword is her magic. She took the attack on purpose and watched it up close so she could finally understand it. That shocks Sandy, who starts wondering what kind of fighter Laika has become. Then Laika rushes at her sister, and Sandy is instantly thrown off by the sudden speed. She can't figure out how Laika changed her movement so fast. Before Sandy can catch up, Laika keeps landing hits and says she understands the Thunderclap greatsword arts now. Sandy doesn't want to believe Laika figured it out and copied it that quickly. In the stands, Langus and the others start cheering because Laika has turned the fight around. Zeke smiles and says fighting someone with the same style can teach you a lot. Rick asks if he knows why Laika's movement changed so suddenly, and he explains that Laika mastered Sandy's Thunderclap greatsword art in the middle of the fight. That's what their training was for, staying calm and reading the enemy even while taking the attack. He adds that Laika used to lose herself in battle, so all she could see was her own sword. Now she's different. The protagonist says she can stay calm enough to watch her opponent even in the middle of a fierce fight. By studying a sword style so close to her own, Laika breaks into a whole new level. Even as the battle keeps going, Sandy still thinks Laika can't possibly outdo her, but she quickly learns she was wrong. Sandy fires off her thunderbolt, but Laika pushes through it and comes out of the chaos, telling Sandy that Zeke's brutal training nearly killed her more than once. Leaping in, she says it's time to use her own Thunderclap arts. Laika reveals a new move, Heavenly Thunder, and with it, she completely overwhelms Sandy. Sandy cries out in pain, and before she blacks out, she admits that Laika really has become stronger. With that, East Hall is declared the winner. Even Vanille is shocked by what just happened. Laika heads back to her friends, and Zeke praises her for the win. Still, he's annoyed that he didn't get his turn. Laika is just happy the match was decided in her fight. Even so, if she had lost, MC would have gone up against Aegis. He asks if Laika knows him. She says not personally, but Aegis is famous. From what she's heard, Aegis is the biggest genius the Vanblade family has ever produced. Zeke can tell that's true. Just by watching, he knows Aegis is above the other fighters. Laika wonders what would have happened if the protagonist had faced him. Right then, the instructor announces that East Hall has already won. But in a surprise move, he says the matches will keep going to the end. They can't understand why since the battle was supposed to stop after 4 members were beaten. Zeke also starts wondering what the real goal is. But whatever the reason, he doesn't care. Now he gets to fight the prodigy, Aegis. As they enter the ring, Aegis says he's glad they still get to fight even after North Hall lost. MC is surprised Aegis wants this so badly, and Aegis says MC is the East Hall representative even with Laika on the team, which made him curious. Aegis says he may have the head's bloodline, but he's still only at 2 stars, while Laika is at 3 stars and still wasn't chosen as the representative. All of that only made Aegis want to fight him even more. The protagonist likes hearing that and says they think the same way. He says he wants this fight too. And the moment Aegis hears that, he gets even more excited. Aegis draws his sword, ready to start. Zeke is just as ready. It's been a while since he fought a swordsman. Aegis moves first and rushes MC in an instant. He is impressed by how fast Aegis closes the gap. Once he gets in range, Aegis uses a sword art that erases the presence of his blade. Zeke is shocked and impressed, but he still dodges the strike. Aegis thought he had him, but the protagonist twists away at the last second and escapes the cut. MC praises the technique and tells Aegis to show him more. Aegis does just that using another sword art called Waveblade, which makes his attacks even harder to read. It flows like a wave, and Zeke first thinks it's not a big deal. He changes his mind fast when he sees how deadly it is, then jumps clear to avoid the strike. While in the air, he praises him and says he's not planning to get cut yet. Aegis doesn't pause and switches to a lightning-based technique, using the extra speed to rush Zeke again. Seeing that, the protagonist admits Aegis really is a genius because his attacks are so hard to predict. They're not just fast, They hit hard too, making every strike clean and deadly. MC realizes Aegis could never use techniques like these without pushing his body through brutal training. He keeps dodging, and now Aegis is impressed that he still can't pin him down. Aegis praises the protagonist and asks what kind of training he does. The protagonist tells him to join him sometime if he wants to know. Still, MC says they can talk after the fight, then finally decides to attack. He charges Aegis with a powered-up punch. To his surprise, Aegis blocks it with his sword and even absorbs the impact. Even so, Aegis is impressed and tells Zeke his power doesn't feel like that of a 2-star fighter at all. He is just as surprised that Aegis adjusted to his style that quickly, faster than he expected. Aegis asks if the protagonist was done studying him and if that's why he finally attacked. MC says yes. Aegis is surprised he already read his martial arts, but that only means he doesn't need to hold back now. Aegis springs at him, and he thinks he's about to repeat the same move as before, but he quickly realizes he's wrong when he senses Aegis' afterimage. By then, Aegis is already right on top of him, and his blade cuts across. Zeke barely avoids the full hit, but his chest still gets sliced. Smiling, Aegis tells the protagonist he still has plenty more techniques to show. Being the battle addict he is, MC breaks into a huge grin because this fight is only getting more exciting. Later, Sandy wakes up and realizes she really lost. Her teammates rush over to check on her and apologize for losing their own matches. They think they dragged Sandy down, but she tells them not to blame themselves. The other side was just really strong. She tells them to use this loss and come back better next time. Then Sandy guesses the West Wing and South Wing have already started fighting. Her teammates say no and point to the arena where an amazing match is happening right now. Sandy looks over and freezes. She's shocked to see Zeke and Aegis battling like total maniacs. Once she recognizes Aegis' technique, she realizes he's using everything he's got. And when she sees him handling Aegis at full strength, Sandy recalls Laika saying he was the strongest of them all. Back in the arena, Aegis tries a different technique, but that fails too. Now he's left wondering what kind of body Zeke even has. The protagonist says he worked hard on his basic endurance. Martial arts matter, sure, but the basics matter just as much. Aegis can only agree and decides he needs to start training his body more too. After watching how Aegis fights and seeing his talent, Zeke decides he'll become someone important later on. This fight also makes MC finally see how different the present is from 1,000 years ago. Back then, martial arts were all about the attack itself, and real combat meant showing everything through your own technique. Ether was mostly there to support that. But in the modern age, ether itself is used to shape and express everything. So now mastering ether is the core of martial arts. Zeke grins, realizing it took him way too long to understand that because he was so focused on technique. He smiles like a beast, thrilled that 1,000 years of change could be this interesting. Meanwhile, Aegis is amazed that he has shut down every technique he's used so far. In the stands, Langus complains that they've been going at it for 2 hours and still don't look close to stopping. Then Laika says it's almost over. And in the arena, Aegis realizes Zeke is finally ready to beat him now that he's finished reading all his moves. The protagonist confirms it and says the fight was fun while it lasted. Aegis agrees. Then MC says he'll show Aegis his respect by using what he learned in this battle. So he unveils a new technique and Aegis smiles, knowing he never really had a chance. Even so, he says he won't go down easily and fires off his strongest technique. Zeke answers with his new move, sending a storm of energy punches down from the air. The attack blasts through the whole area, and even the students have to shield themselves. That insane clash of power leaves everyone staring in awe. When the dust settles, the instructor calls the match. Aegis' sword is shattered, and he's collapsed on the ground, worn out. Still smiling, he admits he has a long way to go. Zeke lets out a cheer as he's named the winner. The students are stunned. They never thought the protagonist could win, and now they're wondering who he really is. His teammates, though, aren't that shocked. They know what MC can do. Laika uses the moment to scold him for wrecking the arena and showing off his ridiculous power again. Zeke argues that a huge win should count for something, but says they should move on from his fight and pay attention to Vanille's match instead. The protagonist says the West Wing has the strongest lineup overall, but the South Wing seems to have one standout fighter too. He expected it to be close, but the West Wing completely crushed them in the end, with Vanille looking especially fired up. Before that match, Zeke admitted his last attack did too much damage, and the arena might take forever to fix. But Lengus tells him not to worry. MC is shocked when the arena starts repairing itself. Lengus explains the whole place is built with a rare stone called etherlite. By pouring ether into it, the arena returns to normal, and that leaves him amazed. He says it's incredible they used something that valuable to build the entire place. After the west and south finish, the instructor senses something is off. He doesn't believe Vaniel should have been able to beat the South's top girl, Lila. Even so, Mentric stops the match and names the West Wing the winners. He announces the finals will be East Hall versus West Hall in 1 hour. Even students who know how strong Lila is can't believe she lost. Zeke also feels something is wrong because Vanille and Lila aren't that far apart in skill. But for some reason, Lila's power output is terribly low. That's why she got crushed so badly by Vanille. Zeke can tell the instructor noticed too, but nobody actually knows what's going on. Raymond talks about how amazing Vanille is for beating Lila like that, but Celine says something feels wrong. Marin suggests that maybe it only seems strange because this is their first time seeing elites from another hall. Rick also praises Vanille, putting him up there with the protagonist in Laika. Then Rick notices Langus has gone quiet and asks what's bothering him. Langus says Vanille is impressive, but what really worries him is how strong the whole West Wing looks since they have to face them next. He quickly apologizes for sounding weak before the match, but Marin says he's right. She reminds them she lost too, and it hurts knowing they don't measure up to West Hall. Even so, Rick decides he'll fight to the end, just like Langus and the others who keep taking on stronger opponents. His spirit ends up firing up the whole team. Zeke is glad to see everyone motivated again. Still, he's even more worried about Laika because she looks shaken after failing to notice Lila's loss wasn't natural. Since he doesn't know enough yet, MC can't just tell Laika not to worry, and that leaves him unsure what to do. Right then, Laika leaves the arena and tells the others she needs some air. She heads to the spring near the arena to think things through. She's shocked that Vanille got strong enough to beat Lila so easily. She knows even Aegis would struggle against Lila, yet Vanille handled her without trouble. Laika remembers losing to Vanille the last time they fought back when she was 5. Since then, she's trained to get revenge, and she thought she'd finally caught up. But if things keep going like this, Vanille's next opponent will be Zeke. Part of her feels relieved since that means she won't have to face Vanille herself, but she hates herself for feeling that way without even fighting him first. A moment later, Vanille shows up and starts mocking Laika. She tells him to leave. She has nothing to say to him. Vanille sneers that if he becomes family head, she might end up his wife. Laika snaps back that she'll be the one who becomes head. Vanille reminds her she can't win, especially after seeing the gap between them. Laika furiously tells him to shut up, but Vanille keeps pushing, telling her to admit she'll never beat him. He tells Laika to give up and submit, promising he'll treat her well. She knocks his hand away and tells him to shut up before storming off. After she leaves, Vanille turns to Alan and reminds him that he knows what to do. Alan asks what they'll do about Zeke, and Vanille says they'll carry out the plan during the match. Alan thinks they should strike first since he looks strong. Vanille agrees, but warns that the protagonist is sharp and could notice if they move before the match. He also reminds Alan that MC always lets himself get hit on purpose, so planting something on him during the fight would be easy. Vanille is sure he won't lose to an illegitimate child like Zeke even without any tricks. He assures Alan that they'll come out on top. When the next match starts, Rick goes first for the East again. Inside, he's upset that he and Marin are seniors, yet still the weakest reps. The West Wing intimidates him badly, and he starts wondering if he can really win. While he's stuck in his own head, Zeke walks up behind him and smacks him, calling him an idiot. He asks where all Rick's confidence went, and Rick starts stammering. Then he asks if he plans to fight just to lose. Rick says no, and the protagonist tells him to fight to win no matter how big the strength gap is. That's what really matters, and the words fire Rick back up. Zeke reminds him he's trained enough. Now he just needs to trust himself. Before sending him off, MC gives one last tip. Relax your shoulders. Rick doesn't get it at first, so he explains that great strength fist gathers power into one point. But if your body is too tense, that power spreads out instead. He demonstrates it for Rick and tells him to loosen up. With the protagonist's help, Rick gets fired up and shouts that he can do this. Then the protagonist sends him into the arena. After Rick leaves, Laika walks over and asks Zeke how he knows so much about other martial arts. MC says that's a pretty dumb question. The only answer is that he's just him. Laika just stares at the protagonist, shocked that this was his answer, then admits it was dumb to even ask. As the fight is about to start, Rick studies the guy across from him. He can tell right away this opponent is tough after what he showed in the first round. Still, Rick has no plan to lose here. The other guy catches that look on his face. He laughs and reminds Rick that he lost to North Hall, so he shouldn't act proud. Rick fires back that he's not the same anymore. His opponent doesn't buy it at all. The instant the referee calls the start, the guy rushes Rick at once, swinging his daggers and scoffing that nobody changes in just a few hours. Then he bursts forward with one of his stronger moves. Rick blocks it with his aura that only makes the guy mad, so he comes at Rick again. This time, the assault is even harsher, and the rain of slashes tears into Rick and leaves him in serious pain. The guy keeps mocking him, bringing up how he claimed he'd changed. Rick is already beaten up, and he knows this enemy is insanely strong, but he's still not giving in. He throws a punch, but the guy slips past it and cuts him in return. Rick cries out, then starts wondering how he's supposed to keep up with someone this fast. Then he remembers Zeke telling him to stay loose and focus all his power into one point. Right then, his opponent charges again. This time, Rick is ready. The attack lands, but Rick suddenly grins and tells him he's got him now. A second later, the guy realizes Rick caught the blade with his bare hand. Now that he's pulled his enemy in close, Rick drives out a heavy punch that blasts the guy away. He only stops when he slams into the wall. The referee steps in right away and ends it, naming Rick the winner. At first, it doesn't feel real, but once Rick understands he actually won, he throws his head back and celebrates like crazy. His opponent can't believe he lost. When he crawls back toward Vanille, Vanille angrily punches him away. Then glaring at the rest of his team, Vanille reminds them they're supposed to crush the East Wing. Later, Marin steps onto the stage, and Rick cheers her on, telling her she's got this. A moment later, the second match starts. Marin opens strong. She goes straight into her sword art, Spark Slash, but her opponent avoids it and fires back with his spear. That miss leaves Marin wide open, and before she can recover, he drives a brutal hit into her stomach. Marin drops to her knees. He doesn't let up and smashes her again. Her teammates watch in horror and anger. Rick even tries to rush in, but Raymond stops him. If he interferes, it's a disqualification. Then the referee calls the match, giving West Hall the win. The guy even steps on Marin to show off. Her friends hurry over to her, and things look bad. Marin isn't responding. While everyone tries to wake Marin up, Zeke stays in the back. He's silent, but the look on his face says he's furious. Rangus and Seelan panic over Marin, while Eric desperately calls her name. Rangus wonders if she'll be okay, and Seelan says those injuries were way too much. MC, though, just stands there with a cold, angry stare, quietly watching the other side. As Marin's opponent starts to walk away, Eric suddenly yells at him. He demands to know if there was any reason to go that far. The man turns back, his face hardening. Then he asks if they have a problem. When Eric presses him, the man says this was a real fight and he just did what he had to do to make sure Marin lost for good. That answer only makes Eric madder. He says that even in a fight, what he did to Marin went too far. She was badly hurt and knocked out. Celine backs Eric up, shouting that he's right and that none of that was needed. The man just smirks and says they're too soft. In West Hall, they don't show mercy to enemies. Pointing at them, he says West Hall just crushes the other side. That's all. Leica steps forward with a dark look and asks if Vaniel ordered this. The man answers, so what? Then he tells them to forfeit if they don't like it. He asks Leica if she doesn't get what it means that the referee never stopped the match. He goes on, saying Marin still had the will to fight, so all he did was break it. To him, that was natural. Leica snaps back in anger, but Marin's opponent just complains that they're too loud before turning away. As he leaves, he mocks them and says they should worry about themselves because they'll all end up like Marin. Not long after, Retin steps in and says that's simply how it works. If they want, they can forfeit right now. Then he looks at Rangus and asks if he heard all that. Rangus turns toward him sweating and quietly says Retin's name. Retin casually tells Rangus to get used to calling him that, then asks if he's planning to forfeit their match. Rangus says nothing. Retin mocks him again, saying if Rangus wants to get played with like Marin, he won't stop him. He even asks if Rangus wants the same treatment as back in the village, calling him weak. Rangus lowers his head, his face going dark. Leica is furious, but Rangus stops her and says it's fine. Then he slowly gets up and says he isn't running. That makes Leica turn and stare at him in surprise. Rangus says that today, right here, he's going to surpass Retin. Retin instantly looks annoyed and demands to know what Rangus means. As Marin stays unconscious, the medics keep treating her. All around them, the crowd watches in silence. In the arena, Rangus lets out a long breath and tightens his grip on his spear when someone suddenly calls his name. He jumps, confused, then quickly realizes the voice is Zeke's. When Rangus looks over, he calmly tells him not to worry. Nobody else can hear this. According to the protagonist, he's speaking straight into Rangus's mind. He says he recreated this trick years ago after reading a lot of books. Rangus doesn't even know where to start with that, but Zeke tells him the important part is that he's calling to give advice. When Rangus asks what kind, MC says clouds drift free and water flows gently. Rangus wonders what that's supposed to mean. Zeke goes on, saying clouds move without worry and water flows soft and easy. Whenever Rangus is struggling, he should picture that. Just then, Mentric asks what Rangus is doing, and Rangus quickly apologizes before taking his stance. Mentric then announces that the next battle between West Hall and East Hall is about to begin. The moment Rangus hears the signal, he steps in and strikes at Retin with Cloud Water Spear style, Water Pierce. Retin is surprised by Rangus's speed for a second, but he still knocks the attack aside and deflects the spear. Then Rangus tells Rangus not to get cocky, calling him a weak little runt. He uses Serpent Strike Sword style, Ambush Pierce, his aura taking the form of a snake. It shoots straight for Rangus' chest. Even as Rangus blocks, Retin sneers that this is all Rangus has after talking so big, then rushes in again while calling him pathetic. Rangus says nothing and raises his spear to meet the next blow. But when Retin uses another Serpent Strike move, Serpentine Slash, Rangus gets caught off guard. The strike bends like a snake, making it impossible to block cleanly, and it hits him in the side. Rangus is sure he defended, but Retin somehow changed the attack's path in the middle of the swing. Retin mocks him and tells Rangus to hit him back if he can. Rangus refuses to back down and says he still can. He launches Cloud Water Spear style, flowing clouds and water. But before the weapons meet, Retin smiles. A second later, his strike curves again, hits Rangus and blasts him away. Laika and the others are shaken. While Zeke watches without a word, he still says nothing as the fight goes on. When the dust clears, Rangus is on one knee, still holding his spear. He thinks he's been trying to block and counter, but every move keeps getting used against him. Rangus asks if that's what Rangus was aiming for. Laughing, Rangus tells him to stop joking. He says countering is his specialty, and for Rangus, that's bad luck because he's above him in every way. Rangus struggles to stay on his feet and grips his spear tighter, saying that can't be true. But Retin suddenly steps in, grabs Rangus by the hair, and sneers that he's living in a fantasy. Then he says a child of a pseudo-dragon could never be strong, and that Rangus is nothing but a weakling like his father. Even in pain, Rangus warned Redon not to insult his father. Redon yanked his hair, slammed a punch into his face, and called him a fake dragon. Rangus crashed to the ground. Redon kept kicking and beating him, yelling that a fake dragon could never beat the real one. As the blows kept coming, Ranga started thinking maybe Redon was right. He believed he'd gotten stronger, but now it felt like he had only fooled himself. Tears slid down his face as that thought sank in. In his head, the same words kept repeating. He was only a fake dragon. Then a memory came back. He was by a river, fishing with his father. His father asked if he liked fishing, then said he liked it too. He said he loved fishing while watching the clouds and the moving water. When Rangus asked if he liked those too, his father said yes. With a smile, he said the clouds drift so peacefully, and the river never stops flowing. Watching both made him feel that people's worries were actually small. When Rangus asked what that meant, his father only said that maybe one day he would understand it too. Back in the present, Rangus lay on the ground, bloody and barely moving. He whispered, drifting and flowing. Mentric said nothing and kept watching closely. A moment later, Retin grabbed Rangus again and said this was the end. Pulling aura into his fist for the final hit, Retin sneered that a fake dragon would always stay fake and should crawl through life on his hands and knees, but then Rangus opened his eyes. He remembered what Zeke told him before the match. Be like gently flowing water. Rangus's aura started moving through his body in a smooth, steady flow. Just before the punch landed, Rangus blocked it. Rangus froze at that sudden defense. When he felt the aura coming from Rangus, he jumped back and hurried to recover his sword. Mintric smiled, surprised by the sudden shift. He had seen the 3rd star on Rangus' chest light up, proof that Rangus had reached 3-star level in the middle of the fight. Retin's face twisted at once, dark with anger. More than anything, he couldn't believe Rangas had broken through during their battle. That only made him madder. Retin refused to accept that Rangas now stood at the same level, snarling that he'd never enjung a fake as his equal. Getting ready to attack again, he shouted that he'd never accept someone he used to mock reaching the same 3-star rank. Retin instantly used Serpent Strike sword style, Serpent and Slash, sending a fast twisting blow at Rangas. Even with one eye nearly swollen shut, Rangas moved at once and slipped past the strike even when it changed direction. Retin was stunned. That attack had hit before. So how did Rangs dodge it now? He started to wonder if Rangs had already figured out his pattern, and he couldn't stand the thought. Refusing to believe it, Rangs attacked again with rampaging Serpent Flash, raining blows down and daring Rangs to survive this one. But Rangs dodged every hit, moving as naturally as drifting clouds and flowing water. Laika could barely believe it. Zeke watched calmly and said Rangs had taken one more step toward the essence. Curious, Laika quickly asked what he meant. He explained that clouds drift and water keeps flowing no matter what. Rangas was starting to do the same, taking force in, letting it pass, and adjusting with each move. He added that he had shown Rangas a small glimpse of it earlier, but now Rangs had truly made it his own during this fight. Laika stared in awe, sweat forming on her cheek, as she said she couldn't believe Rangs had done that so fast. Still, Zeke pointed out that Rangs didn't even seem to realize it yet, which showed just how sharp his focus was. Retin could only curse as he watched. For the first time, fear started creeping into him. In a desperate yell, he warned Ranges not to come closer and threw out a storm of attacks. Still, every strike missed just like before. When his sword finally met Ranges' spear, Retin couldn't handle the force behind it. As he tried to attack again, Zeke suddenly laughed, saying this was exactly it because water isn't always calm. The moment Retin saw what Ranges was about to do, panic hit him. He turned and ran, cursing and wondering how Ranges had gotten this strong. At the same time, Rangas slowly formed a spinning water tornado in the arena's center. Zeke declared that once water turns wild, no one can stand against its current. The attack slammed into Retin's chest and sent him flying. He spat out blood before passing out. Seeing Retin's state, Mintrick immediately called the match. He announced East Hall as the winner. Rangas just stood there, too stunned to understand what had happened. As he tried to make sense of it, Laika and the others rushed over, shouting his name. Laika praised him excitedly, congratulating him on reaching 3-star level and winning right after. To her, it couldn't have ended better. But Rangas, still dazed, asked if she really meant him. Had he actually broken through and won? When he looked at Retin, lying unconscious, Rangas could hardly believe it. He had really beaten the person who had mocked and hurt him since they were kids in the village. Even then, he kept asking if he had truly won. Celine happily said yes and told him the match was amazing. Stammering, Rangas finally admitted he had really defeated Retin. As he stared at him, old memories rushed back. And before he realized it, tears started falling. Eric threw an arm around him and asked why he was crying, then wanted to know what that crazy move was. Rangas still had no idea what he meant, and Laika said she wanted to know too. Reynolds said it looked like a giant water dragon shooting up like a waterfall, wild and incredibly cool. Rangas could only shake his head and insist he didn't know any move like that, but Reynolds was sure that was exactly what it looked like. Then Zeke finally revealed the technique's name, Rising Dragon Pierce. Smiling, the protagonist said it came from the second volume of the Cloud Water Spear style, even though Rangas had only learned the first. Rangas was shocked, and Laika quickly asked how the protagonist knew about the second volume. MC, however, couldn't tell them he was the one who made it. Then Laika realized how amazing Rangas really was. He had reached the second volume by training on his own. Zeke thought to himself that Cloud Water Spear style was something he created in his past life, though he didn't remember putting it into a book. Most likely, later generations wrote it down and split it into volumes, keeping its true core in the higher levels so inexperienced fighters couldn't reach it. Even so, Rangas had found his own way to that hidden core. To him, it was a great sight to see such young talent bloom. Just then, Mentrick called out to East Hall and asked how long they planned to keep chatting. Seelan quickly apologized. Eric then said they should use this momentum and finish the rest, and Seelan agreed, saying she'd do her best. After Rangas' win, East Hall's spirit shot up, but West Hall answered back, and the later matches got even tougher. In the fourth match, Celine fought hard but barely lost, which made Vanel let out a disappointed sigh. Then in the fifth match, Reynolds pushed himself to the edge and pulled off a hard-earned win, bringing things to the final rounds. While Rangas supported him, Reynolds admitted he had barely made it. Rangus praised him, and Eric raised his shield and sword with fresh resolve. Celine apologized, saying the match would already be over if she had won. Laika told her she did well and reminded her they only needed 4 wins. They now had 3 wins and 2 losses with victory right in front of them. Laika confidently said all that was left was for her to win and finish it. Right then, Zeke called out to her. When Laika asked what he wanted, she blushed as he stepped close and asked if she felt okay or if anything seemed wrong. After a small sigh, Laika said she was fine and ready as always. She gently pushed the protagonist back, saying he was too close, then told him not to worry because she wouldn't lose. Rangus cheered her on and told her to do her best. Zeke stayed quiet. As Laika headed toward the arena's center, MC couldn't stop wondering what this strange feeling inside him was. Alan was furious that his teammate had lost to Reynold. Without a pause, he kicked the defeated fighter and coldly called him a useless pawn. When the man slammed into the wall, Alan called him worthless too. Still, Alan said that if he beat Laika in the next match, everything would go back to normal. Laika cut him off at once. With a confident smile, she said that would never happen because she would win their fight. Pulling her sword free, she got ready. At that moment, Mentric officially started the West Hall versus East Hall match. Alan against Laika. In a flash, Laika vanished from her spot and attacked. As she rushed in, Alan immediately noticed how fast she was. While blocking her strike, sweat ran down Alan's cheek as he realized this was Laika, the lightning aura user said to be even stronger than Sandy. After knocking her attack aside, Alan slipped behind her. As Laika landed, Alan jumped back to make space, but Laika didn't let up. She came right back with another lightning aura attack. Alan started to think he might actually lose in raw power. Luckily for him, Vaniel had already made a move before the fight started. Now whatever Vaniel had done took effect on Laika. She froze in shock, asking what had happened while the crowd noticed her lightning aura had completely disappeared. Seeing Laika falter, Vaniel signaled Alan to move in. Alan rushed her at once, yelling that there was no way Laika could beat him. Even without her aura, Laika still met his strike head-on and caught it with her sword. But that wasn't the end of it. Alan suddenly drove a kick into her stomach and knocked her back. Her teammates watched with growing fear. Eric gritted his teeth, frustrated, while Zeke said nothing. Clutching her stomach, Laika kept wondering why her lightning aura wouldn't come out. Alan kept saying she'd never beat him. Then he hammered her with attack after attack. And without her aura, Laika finally dropped. All Laika could do was take the hits. A warrior's body is tied to their source power, and that power boosts every move they make. So if that power cuts out in the middle of a fight, even one strike can turn deadly. Alan swung at Laika's head again. One of her eyes had nearly swollen shut, but Laika refused to give up. She told herself she only had to hold on until her source power and lightning aura came back. Sandy and Aegis grew even more uneasy. Sandy said something was clearly wrong with Laika, and Aegis agreed. He started to wonder if her source power had stopped working and how that was even possible. After taking Alan's non-stop assault, Laika finally sank to her knees in the middle of the arena. She coughed and fought for breath. Even Alan was shocked she had lasted this long without source power, especially for someone seen as a future head alongside Vaniel. When Alan looked over at Vaniel, he found him wearing a cruel smile and clearly telling him to kill Laika. Alan's face hardened. He admitted Laika had lasted longer than expected, but this was where it ended for her. Rangus finally broke and shouted for them to stop the match, rushing toward Laika, but Reynold cut him off and said he couldn't interfere. Zeke, silent until now, suddenly changed. His eyes burned with anger, and aura flared around his fists. He was watching Alan get ready to strike again. In the center of the arena, Laika sat frozen with fear. Her body barely moved as Alan came closer. Just then, a golden flash of lightning tore across the arena. A heartbeat later, Sandy stood in front of Laika with her sword drawn, shouting at Alan and demanding to know what he thought he was doing. Alan froze for a second and stopped his attack. Zeke quietly exhaled in relief. If he had stepped in himself, East Hall would have been disqualified, and West Hall would win by default. Alan demanded to know why Sandy was getting involved, but she fired back that he shouldn't act innocent. He had obviously been trying to kill Laika, and she wanted him to admit it. The crowd went dead silent. Alan just smirked and said Sandy was imagining things, insisting he'd never attack a family head candidate like that. Then Edges stepped into the arena and questioned Alan too. From where he stood, that last attack had looked way too dangerous. Alan snapped, asking if they were accusing him. Edges calmly answered that if he hated suspicion, he should watch his actions better. He said anyone could see Laika had lost use of her source power, and hitting someone like that with aura was out of line. Vanel walked over then, calling out to Edges and asking if he had jumped into the match just to complain. He said real combat doesn't care about an enemy's condition. You crush them completely. According to Vanel, West Hall fights every match like it's a real battle. Still furious, Sandy argued that even then there had to be a limit. This wasn't a fight to the death. Vanel mocked them as weak and said that's exactly why they lose. Edges said nothing, but Sandy only got angrier. Vanil kept going, saying they weren't playing at war. They were fighting for real. He even laughed and said that while this wasn't kill or be killed, they were still holding back. So it wasn't like they had actually tried to kill Laika. Still, with a dark look, he admitted something might have gotten broken. That was enough for Sandy. She exploded with lightning aura and anger. Before things got worse, Mentric released his own aura, and the pressure shut everyone up at once. In a cold voice, he asked who had given them permission to keep up this pointless arguing. Even so, Sandy insisted Alan's attack had clear killing intent, but Mentric brushed her aside, saying someone who didn't belong in the arena had no right to speak. He added that idiots had no business interrupting the match, and whether the fight went on or stopped was his choice alone. Edges apologized right away. Then Mentric ended it. West Hall had won. He ordered everyone not in the next match to leave immediately. Edges quickly picked up Laika and told Sandy to grab her sword before they went. Once they left the arena, Rangus and the others rushed over. Deeply worried about Laika, Edges told them she'd be okay. He had already given her a healing potion, but she needed rest, so he was taking her straight to the infirmary. Zeke noted that Edges might get punished for what he and Sandy had done, but Edges just smiled and told him not to worry. He also said he knew he had been ready to step in too. The protagonist jokingly denied it. As Edges carried Laika away, Sandy said the whole thing felt wrong. Alan was strong, sure, but there was no way he should have crushed Laika like that. Edges agreed. He said something had felt off since the first match with Lila, and West Hall was definitely hiding something. With Laika still unconscious, Edges warned Zeke to be careful when he fought Vanille. MC gave a small nod and thanked him for the warning as he headed toward the center of the arena. Vanille leveled his weapon at him and said it was too bad. He would never beat him, and East Hall was already doomed to lose. Zeke ignored every word and casually stretched right in front of him. Vanille went quiet, his face twitching with anger. Then Mentric announced the 7th match, East Hall versus West Hall. The instant he started it, the protagonist moved. In one blur, he smashed a punch into Vanille's jaw and sent blood flying. MC coldly said Vanille's smug act pissed him off, and he wanted to see how long it lasted. The punch launched Vanille all the way into the far wall, setting off a huge explosion. The entire crowd was stunned. Even Metric's eyes widened at what he had just seen. Zeke added that for someone who bragged so much about real combat, Vanille had left himself wide open, then asked if this was really the kind of combat Vanille liked. Before he hit him again, he first asked Vanille a question that left the West Hall fighter visibly shaken. The protagonist said he'd fight in real combat mode too, and asked if Vanille was sure he wouldn't regret it. Vanille asked what he meant, then arrogantly claimed the protagonist would be the one sorry, though deep down he was confused. MC spoke again, and as he clenched his fists, his eyes gave off a faint glow and his face turned cold. Suddenly, Alan shouted, "Lord Vanille," in shock. He launched another heavy attack at Vanille, but Vanille barely answered with a strong counter of his own, a fast sphere of wind rushing towards Zeke. But before it landed, the protagonist simply tipped his head aside and let it fly past him into the arena wall. When Vanille got back up, he cursed under his breath. He had clearly felt MC's blow, but he couldn't understand why he was still standing there unharmed. Vanille knew he had countered the moment he attacked, so this made no sense to him. The protagonist then said he understood now. Vanille had wind-type source power. He asked if Vanille came from one of the 4 great sword families and whether that was his clan's special power. Vanille, still furious, only called the protagonist a bastard. MC mocked him, asking how real combat felt and saying he'd even matched Vanille's style a little just for him. That only made Vanille angrier. As he demanded an explanation, he suddenly froze. He was already behind him. With a slight glance back and glowing eyes, the protagonist calmly said that made 2. He then chopped the back of Vanille's neck and sent him flying across the arena. When Vanille finally stopped, he couldn't believe this nonsense. How could someone like him be getting tossed around so easily by Zeke? The moment Vanille stood again, MC rushed him once more. As he readied another blow, MC said thinking in the middle of a real fight wouldn't save him. He asked if Vanille had always lived this comfortably until now. Then he slammed a brutal punch into Vanille's chest, making his whole body jolt. Vanille's eyes rolled white as he coughed up blood and collapsed to his knees before Zeke. "That's 3, the protagonist said. Shaking in pain, Vanille demanded to know what he meant. What was he counting? MC answered that it was simple. He was counting how many times Vanille had already died in this fight. Vanille stared in confusion as he explained. The first was the hit to his face, the second was the strike to his neck, and the third was the blow to his heart. Zeke said the only reason Vanille was still breathing was because of the rules. Furious, Vanille shouted that it couldn't be true, but the protagonist cut him off with a kick to the face. He said Vanille was right. This was real combat and break time was over. Talking to your enemy wasn't part of it. The kick sent Vanille rolling across the arena. Sandy's face darkened as she watched, unable to believe it. Sweat ran down her face as she said this couldn't even be called a fight anymore. Aegis agreed and said compared to this, his own match with Zeke had felt like a friendly spar. He added that MC was unfair on a whole different level. Standing in the arena with a faint smile, he asked Vanille if he was finally starting to understand what real combat was. Vanille lay on the ground, trembling and barely able to move from his injuries. Zeke admitted that crushing the enemy completely did matter on the battlefield, just like Vanille had said. He added that Vanille and the others from West Hall would probably become great warriors someday. Vanille tried to drag himself toward the protagonist. MC shut his eyes for a second and said this wasn't a battlefield. Instructors were watching, and healing potions were right there. So for someone like Vanille to talk about real combat was almost laughable. Still in pain, Vanille told him to shut up. Zeke kept going, saying Vanille's idea of real combat had nothing to do with reality. He said Vanille was just running from his own weakness, then asked if he was wrong. Vanille didn't answer. He just screamed at him to be quiet over and over, angrier than ever. Then a green whirlwind rose behind Vanille. That sudden burst left the crowd stunned. Vanille snapped that a bastard like Zeke had no right to lecture him. The protagonist calmly asked if Vanille was in a rebellious phase, because if so, none of this would sink in anyway. He added that as Vanille's opponent, he could take all of that anger. Getting ready to strike, Vanille yelled at MC to shut up and stop acting like he knew everything. Then he fired off Stormblade from his wind-rending fan arts, sending a wave of wind slashes at him. He jumped up and dodged everyone. While Zeke was in the air, Vanille thought he only needed one opening, just one touch. Elsewhere, Rangus couldn't figure it out. He asked why the ground was being ripped apart when he couldn't see anything. Aegis told him it was Vanille's power. He explained that this was the Fanold family's wind aura, one of the 4 great sword houses. Since the aura was invisible, it made sense Rangus couldn't see it. Sandy, still annoyed, said it was a nasty power that fit Vanille well. Aegis laughed and told her not to say that, though he admitted it was hard to deal with. Vanille kept up the invisible attacks, making him a dangerous opponent. Hearing that only made Rangus worry more. Back in the arena, Vanille was confused because none of his attacks could touch the protagonist, even though the protagonist shouldn't have been able to see them. MC said sight didn't matter. He only had to read the flow of the air. Vanille called that complete nonsense. A moment later, he smacked Vanille on the head and said his guard was open again. Holding his head, Vanille said he was completely sick of Zeke. He threw out a rapid string of attacks, but the protagonist slipped past them with ease, hands behind his back and eyes closed like he was toying with him. After getting cursed out again, MC joked that Vanille really was in a rebellious phase. When Vanille finally let up, he asked if he felt better. That only made Vanille even madder. Vanille threatened to kill him. Zeke said that kind of stubborn spirit was good in a warrior. As he landed another hit, the protagonist added that Vanille's body had already hit its limit. Vanille fell to his knees again. Zeke told him they should end it here since going on would only hurt more. But then a strange purple aura appeared as Vanille grabbed MC's leg. He didn't notice anything odd at first and asked if Vanille still wanted to keep going. As the purple aura grew stronger, Vanille's face twisted and he started laughing like a demon. When Zeke asked what was going on, Vanille poured that aura into his weapon and declared this would be the protagonist's end. He fired Gale Bullet from his wind-rending fan arts. MC tried to use his source power to block it, but something was wrong. He couldn't use it at all. With no other choice, Zeke took the hit using only his body. Ranjis and Eric were shocked that Vanille had finally landed a clean hit. Edges noticed something strange about him and pointed it out. When Celine asked what he meant, Laika and Marin showed up. As they helped Laika sit down, she apologized for making them worry. When they asked if she knew what was happening to Zeke, Laika said she didn't know for sure. She just realized the protagonist was in the same state she had been. In her earlier match, she had suddenly lost the ability to use her source power. She also said Lila had acted strangely in her fight with Vanille, so maybe the same thing happened to her too. If so, then MC probably couldn't use his source power either. Back in the arena, Vanille laughed, sure he had already won. He mocked his earlier confidence and swore he would never stand against him again. Pulling his power together, Vanille got ready to use his ultimate move, Typhoon falling to dust. As the protagonist got back up, Vanille told him to die and unleash the attack. Rangus could only yell Zeke's name in panic, but MC gathered all his physical strength into one fist. Before the attack could land, he charged in and drove a heavy punch straight into Vanille's face. The blow hurled Vanille into the arena wall. When the dust cleared, Vanille stared at him in fear and disbelief. He couldn't understand how he was still standing after all that. His teammates were just as stunned, but Laika only let out a soft laugh. She said it looked like the protagonist didn't care whether he could use source power or not. Vanille could barely process it. Even after using that strange power and landing the full attack, Zeke was still standing. As MC rose again, he sensed a strange purple energy moving through and around his body. It didn't take long to realize it was poison. That made Vanille even more angry and confused. How had he figured it out? As far as Vanille knew, that poison shouldn't have been noticeable at all. Then Zeke spoke. He said Vanille had finally earned a passing score, and now he understood why everyone who fought Vanille and Alan lost so badly. The protagonist added that the poison only kicked in when source power was activated. He admitted it fooled even him until he tried using his own power. Still, he gave Vanille credit for making such a poison. Vanille shouted that it had completely sealed Zeke's source power and demanded to know how he survived that last attack. MC proudly answered that Vanille's poison meant nothing to a fully trained body. Even with his source power sealed, it was only a small problem. Someone like him, the strongest, wouldn't be shaken by that. Hearing his poison brushed off so easily only made Vanille more furious. With rage in his voice, he asked if he was calling his creation, his true killing poison, meaningless. The protagonist tilted his head and asked if Vanille had made it himself. He noted that the poison didn't seem to affect its creator. Vanille could pour it into others with source power and still suffer no backlash. Zeke admitted that was a huge breakthrough and said making something like that was impressive. But then he raised his voice and said it still wouldn't work on him. MC took a deep breath and forced all the poison out through his nose. Vanille's eyes went wide. Sweat ran down his face as he watched Zeke detox himself and blow the poison out through his nostrils. He calmly said the poison was unusual and interesting, but that was it. In the end, strength was what mattered. And if Vanille depended on poison alone, he still had far to go. Vanille froze, shaken by that. Then he asked what the protagonist meant, but instead of explaining, MC simply asked if Vanille was satisfied now. That only made Vanille clench his teeth harder. Then memories rushed back. Memories of the harsh life he grew up in. He heard his mother's cold words again, telling him he had to become the next head of the L-Dragon family. If he couldn't, then he had no reason to exist. He remembered everyone praising Lady Laika for already mastering the family's secret art. People called every future heir a genius except him. Vanille knew it too. He was ordinary. The harder he tried, the more it showed. He could accept his older siblings being stronger, but not that Laika, who was younger, had gone so far beyond him. He remembered his mother yelling at him, asking how he could fail something so simple. Those endless scoldings left deep scars on him. But during all that pain, he finally found one talent of his own, making poison. When he created this poison, he thought he had finally found his way. With it, he could become the next family head. With it, his mother might finally acknowledge him. And now Zeke had cleansed it with ease and called it meaningless. Furious, Vanille shouted, asking what he could possibly know about him. He said he was always compared to geniuses no matter how hard he worked. Next to their overwhelming talent, he felt like nothing, and the comparisons never ended. That's why he had no choice but to fight and claw his way upward. As he attacked again, Vanille yelled that Zeke had no right to judge a life he knew nothing about. The protagonist blocked with his left arm and grabbed Vanille's arm with his right. But Vanille suddenly reversed his weapon and released all his poison at once, burying MC in a thick toxic cloud. His friends tensed up while Aegis kept watching in silence. Sandy couldn't hold back and asked what Zeke was going to do. Inside the poison cloud, Vanille admitted the protagonist was right. He would rely on poison. Winning was all that mattered. He knew he lacked talent in battle, but poison was the one thing he believed in. With that, he thought he couldn't lose. He never wanted to use this move, but now he had to. Vanille explained that even he, the creator, could barely neutralize this deadly poison needle cloud. Using it meant he had to breathe some in himself. Still, he was sure victory was his until Zeke suddenly grabbed his hand again. Vanille's eyes went wide in horror when he saw MC catch the poison needles in his mouth and clamp down on them with his teeth. He calmly asked if this was Vanille's last trump card. Vanille couldn't believe it. As the protagonist spat out the needles, Vanille dropped to the ground in front of him. His face went dark and his eyes shook as he watched Zeke's hands come closer. But instead of striking, MC placed both hands on Vanille's shoulders and told him to listen carefully. Kneeling in front of him, he said Vanille had one big misunderstanding. When Vanille asked what he meant, Zeke explained that strength doesn't come from martial talent or special skill with source power. What matters is the will to win every fight. That, he said, was the first lesson Vanille needed to learn because it was the road to real strength. The protagonist suddenly snapped that Vanille's idea that he had no talent for fighting was just wrong. The real issue was his weapon. He said Vanille needed something with a longer reach. Then he tossed out an odd idea. An umbrella might actually fit him. Vanille froze and asked if he meant that. Zeke said he did. Sounded weird, but he wasn't joking. He explained that, like an iron fan, an umbrella had been used as a weapon for a long time. With a faint smile, MC added that almost anything could become a weapon. Vanille went quiet. For the first time, he started to wonder if there really was a weapon made for him. Then Zeke rested a hand on his head and told him something unexpected. On the battlefield, Vanille was more of a warrior than most people. Vanille had no answer to that. He went on, saying Vanille's way of thinking in a real fight wasn't wrong. If you win, that's what matters. But if he held on to pride too much, he would never protect anything. To win and guard what mattered, he had to use every tool he had. So his mindset wasn't the problem. He was just using it in the wrong place. Zeke rose to his feet, then he reached out a hand. He told Vanille to come with him. Vanille looked at him, confused, as Zeke promised that if he followed him, he'd make him as strong as he wanted to be. Vanille asked if he could really become like the protagonist. MC answered right away yes and said Vanille was already much stronger than he thought. He warned that once training started, Vanille wouldn't have time to whine about talent. He would push him until he got strong. Vanille stood there stunned by how boldly the protagonist said it. But when he thought back on those words and his wish to grow stronger and win his mother's approval, he slowly reached out to take Zeke's hand. But right before their hands touched, MC suddenly drove an uppercut into him, saying he almost forgot they were still in a match. Vanille was completely dumbfounded. After all that talk, Zeke still hit him. He only said a match was a match. And when Vanille woke up, he should come find him. As Vanille blacked out, the poison in his body was forced out. Mentric quickly called the match. Even he was stunned that the protagonist had purged all the poison with one punch. Then Mentric announced the selection matches were over, and East Hall's Pressure was the final champion. The students from the other halls of Dragon's Nest headed back defeated, carrying the sting of their losses. Later that night, Zeke and the others gathered for a small victory feast. But before it really started, everyone kept sneaking looks at MC. They were all thinking the same thing. East Hall won, so why were students from the other halls invited too? Edges just laughed and said he had no idea either. All eyes turned to Zeke, and he calmly guessed Mentric would explain everything tonight. Meanwhile, he kept eating like none of this bothered him. A moment later, he noticed his friends and the students from the other halls of Dragon's Nest still hadn't touched their food. With his mouth full, he asked what the problem was and why nobody was eating. He even pointed out it would all get cold. Laika finally spoke up. She couldn't get how the protagonist could eat so calmly right now and asked if he wasn't curious at all. The protagonist just kept eating. That only made Laika sigh in defeat. Just then, the door opened and Mentric walked in, apologizing for the wait. He told them to go ahead and eat. Then he noticed Zeke was already digging in, so he casually told everyone else to eat well too. As the meal continued, Mentric explained the feast was also a reward for taking part in the selection matches. Soon, he called for silence and said he'd explain the special mission. Edges raised his hand and asked if they were even supposed to hear this. Metric said that was fine. Edges himself might end up joining. That caught Edges off guard. Metric then revealed that a special rift had appeared a few days earlier on Eldragon family land. Everyone was shocked. Even Zeke remembered reading about rifts in books before. Metric continued, saying most of them probably knew what rifts were, but special rifts were different. Normal methods couldn't clear them. Laika asked what that meant, and Metric explained that this one only allowed 7 people in, all at 3-star rank or lower. Anyone at 4-star or above or any extra person beyond 7 would be thrown out. If those rules weren't met, nobody could enter, not even the family head. So the mission had to follow those limits exactly. Metric added that while the Eldragon family did have some 3-star fighters, rifts had been appearing more often lately, so they were short on people. That's why the students were chosen. He also said the special rift most likely held magic water, which was needed to awaken magic power that made the students visibly tense. Zeke said he'd read about it and Metric confirmed it. By drinking magic water, a person could turn source power into magic power, the key to becoming a magician. Hearing that, MC's eyes lit up as his thoughts started racing. Metric explained that the world was ruled by 8 great houses, including the Eldragon family called the 8 Gates of Dominion. The others all had magic springs that naturally made magic water, but Eldragon had none. That was why this mission mattered so much. They had to clear the special rift and bring back the magic water. Failure wasn't an option. Metric then grew serious and added that the rift had appeared near the border of another one of the 8 Gates of Dominion, the Kerberos family. It was almost certain they'd go after the rift too, so the selection matches were held to find strong candidates from Dragon's Nest who were 3-star or below. Edges and Sandy traded looks. Edges guessed the 7 from East Hall would be sent, while Sandy saw this as a big chance to help Laika move closer to becoming family head. But Metric made it clear that East Hall winning didn't mean all 7 spots would automatically go to them. Even so, Edges still looked hopeful while Sandy started thinking about how she could support Laika. Then Metric stood and slammed the table. From now on, he declared, East Hall would lead the strike team no matter who won or lost before. The matches had been held to study everyone's strengths and fighting styles so the team could be built right. Looking toward Vanille, he noted that some people hadn't been able to fully show what they could do. Then Metric turned to him, who was still eating, and announced that he would choose the strike team. He was caught off guard and immediately asked why he had to decide. The room went quiet as Metric asked what was so surprising. As East Hall's representative, the protagonist should naturally lead and pick the team, but the protagonist said that wasn't what he wanted. After glancing at Laika, he suddenly thought of something. Grinning, MC suggested that Laika should make the picks instead. She was startled and asked why her. MC simply asked if he was going on the mission. Laika said of course he was, then asked if he was really fine with her leading and making the calls. He answered that whether it was fine or not didn't matter. If he were choosing, he'd probably pick only himself. That stunned Laika. She quickly shot back that, knowing him he'd go into the rift alone if he could. While Laika started thinking over the team, Zeke added that if she wanted to become the next family head, this was the perfect chance to sharpen her judgment. He asked Metric if Laika could take the role instead. Metric said he didn't mind, but asked if the protagonist was sure, reminding him that leading this mission would move him closer to becoming family head. With a look far too old for his age, MC said he had no interest in that seat. That shocked everyone, even Vanille and Edges. Edges quickly asked if he meant it, Sandy did too, and Laika asked for sure. Zeke calmly said it wasn't a big deal. It all came down to what he valued. Edges argued that becoming family head meant gaining everything the Eldragon family had, but he said he didn't need any of it. There was only one thing he wanted, the end of the martial path. His words stunned the whole room. Then Zeke told Laika not to worry about him and to focus on choosing the team. Taking his words to heart, Laika stood and began picking the strike team. Meanwhile, in the Kerberos family, the family had asked if the report he got was true. His subordinate confirmed that a special rift had appeared in the Greatsword Abundant Forest. When the family head asked whether the lizards had started moving, his mocking name for Balza, the head of the Eldragon family, the subordinate broke into a cold sweat. A heavy pressure filled the room as the Kerberos family head demanded to know why he was only hearing about this now. The subordinate quickly apologized, saying the Eldragon family had tricked them and caused the delay. Hearing that, the family head said he'd heard of tricks like that before and noted how strangely active the Eldragon family had been in the forest. Now it all made sense. He called them sly little pests. The subordinate added that the rift was very likely hiding magic water. The family head replied that if so, the Eldragon family would do anything to take it. He then asked about the entry conditions and learned the rift required 7 people, all 3-star or lower. The family had said that condition itself wasn't too hard, but the Eldragon family had moved first and had probably taken all 7 slots. But the subordinate revealed Eldragon didn't have enough spare soldiers and was sending trainees instead. The family head repeated that in disbelief, wondering if they really meant to clear a special rift with kids. After confirming the report was real, his aide asked if they should rush to form a team. The family head said it was already too late for that. Still, if the Eldragon family was sending trainees, then one of Bowser's heirs had to be in that group. His subordinate asked what he meant. Instead of answering, the family head asked how many deception bracelets were left. The subordinate said they still had 4. Hearing that, the family head gave a brutal order. Use every bracelet if needed as long as Bowser's children were killed. The subordinate hesitated and warned that they had no idea when they'd get more, but the family head brushed it off. If they kept saving them, they'd just sit there and use. Better to spend them now when it counted. With a nasty grin, he said he'd love to see that lizard bastard's face after losing a child. Watching Bowser Eldragon's reaction would be fun. The day after the celebration, Zeke gathered everyone. He told them they all needed to get much stronger, then started with Eric and Marin. Their order was simple basic training. Just like Rangus and the others, they'd run every day and build strength. The protagonist said a strong base would let them handle tougher techniques later. Eric quickly asked if they really had to train the same way Rangus group did. Zeke answered with a calm, "Is there a problem?" Behind Eric and Marin, Rangus and the others were grinning, so the two could only force an answer. They said it was fine even though they clearly didn't mean it. Even so, MC liked their answer. A moment later, he moved on. He yanked away a red cloth to reveal a huge boulder, then called Raymond over and said he'd train with the regeneration stone their instructor had prepared. Raymond was stunned that his training would use a regeneration stone. Zeke confirmed it, saying he remembered how it worked and thought it was perfect for this. Picking up a small shield, he reminded them that the regeneration stone throws back any hit at a 100 times the force, and nobody can break it without source power. Then he got ready to hit it without using source power at all. That made Eric and Marin wonder what he was trying to do. He gathered all his raw strength into one arm, then Zeke slammed the small shield into the regeneration stone, and a fierce blast of wind burst out. Marin could barely believe it. The protagonist had struck the regeneration stone normally. Without source power, the backlash should have crushed him. Everyone froze and watched. Raymond was especially shocked. He quickly understood what had happened. Zeke had endured the reflected impact. He'd taken the shock from the regeneration stone with only his shield. MC showed them the cracked shield and told Raymond to train the same way. Either take the recoil head on or redirect it. Raymond accepted it and quietly decided to follow his example. Celine, meanwhile, said she never thought a regeneration stone could be used for training. Then Zeke called Celine forward and she answered right away. He told her to keep thrusting at the regeneration stone. She could use source power, but every strike had to aim at one exact spot. No drifting. Agreed at once and drew her sword. She fired off a rapid string of thrust at the regeneration stone, but they landed all over the place. Zeke pointed that out and said hitting the same point over and over was harder than it sounded. Celine admitted he was right, so her training would be simple. Learn to strike one point every time. The protagonist borrowed Celine's sword and walked up to the stone. He noted that it had already healed the damage she'd done, said he still wasn't used to seeing that, and told her this was why it made such a great training tool. Then he told Celine to watch carefully. In the next second, he unleashed a rapid flurry with her sword. Every hit landed on the exact same point of the regeneration stone. Celine was left speechless. Zeke explained that her flower sword style focused too much on the number of attacks. She'd do better by making each strike count and placing it right, and Celine agreed. Next, MC called up Rangus. Rangus answered at once, curious about what kind of training he was getting. That curiosity turned to shock when Zeke pulled out a feather and said this would be his training tool. Using wind source power, he made the feather float. Rangus quickly realized it was the same kind of wind source power Lord Vanille used. Raymond asked when the protagonist learned wind source power, and he casually said he got it after fighting Vanille. After taking Vanille's wind aura head-on, he found he could use it too. That left Rangus staring in total disbelief. Then Zeke set the feather on the tip of Rangus' spear and explained what he wanted. Rangus had to train himself to move with the flow. Rangus understood that the feather was so light it would be hard to control, yet he still had to move it freely. He couldn't quite grasp what go with the flow was supposed to mean. Zeke explained it wasn't about chasing the flow or trying to grab it. It meant giving yourself over to it. And once Rangus mastered that, he'd someday be able to create the flow himself. MC narrowed his eyes, then split the feather in two in a single instant. Sweat rolled down Rangus's face as he stared at it in disbelief. Right then, Laika showed up and called to Zeke. She said they'd be late if they didn't hurry. He suddenly remembered he had to leave, so he tossed Rangus's spear back. As he ran off, he reminded them they already knew their drills and told them to keep training while he was away. Rangus and Eric nodded, though neither felt good about the training they'd been given. Rangus especially felt he might not be able to do what Zeke asked. He ended up in tears, and Eric tried to comfort him even while doubting he could handle his own training too. While walking down a corridor, Laika asked the protagonist what had almost made them late. He apologized and said he'd been setting up training for Rangus and the others before they left. Then MC changed the subject and said Laika's strike team lineup was interesting. Laika proudly said it was perfect, the best team she could put together. As they kept walking, the rest of the special mission team spotted them. Aegis greeted them, and Laika apologized for the delay, saying she had to go get Zeke. The strike team included Sandy, Aegis, Layla, Vanille, Alan, him, and Laika. Once everyone was together, they got ready to leave at once. Earlier that day, Metric had told Balza that the strike team had already departed. He also said word about the special rift had come in, and Balza noted it was sooner than expected. But even if they rushed there now, the team would already be inside the rift. One of the men there agreed, but he had a concern. After the rift was cleared, the mutts might show up and steal the rewards. He said it would be best for the strike team to link up fast with the soldiers guarding the area, though he wasn't sure that could happen. Balza went quiet for a moment, then asked how strong the strike team was. Metric said they had picked the best of the 3-star rank, so clearing the rift shouldn't be a problem. Even if the mutts appeared, the team could hold them off. Balza still wasn't fully convinced and asked if that was true even with a 2-star fighter among them. Metric waved that off. He said the team could handle it and Zeke alone might even be enough to face the mutts. That stunned Balza and the man beside him. Metric went on to say that after watching all of Balza's children for years, the protagonist was the first one whose true limit he couldn't read at all. The man next to Balza asked if MC was really only 2-star, and Metric said yes. He added that watching him reminded him again that rank and real strength were not always the same thing. The man beside Balza went silent, sweat forming on his brow. Metric then revealed that when he first saw Zeke's techniques, he felt the same thing he had when he first witnessed Balza's Dragon Destruction combat arts. That shocked everyone there, even Balza, who immediately asked what Metric meant. The Dragon Destruction combat arts were a secret style passed only from one L Dragon family head to the next. They were hidden away so completely that normal people were said to have no chance of learning them. The man beside Balza called that ridiculous and asked if Metric was really saying Zeke had mastered something that powerful. Metric admitted it had shocked him too. But after seeing Balza's techniques so many times, he trusted what he saw. He even said the protagonist's martial arts stood on the same level as Balza's Dragon Destruction combat arts. Balza had no answer for a moment. Metric then thought that MC might even surpass Balza, but he quickly pushed the thought aside as nonsense. Balza then revealed that years ago, he had Freya investigate every part of his past, even his birth records. They found nothing useful, and there was no sign he had learned martial arts from anyone before entering the dragon's nest. The man beside Balza wondered if that meant the protagonist had taught himself everything. But Metric instead looked up at a portrait of the first patriarch, Jilphas Eldragon, and said it was almost like Zeke was the reincarnation of both the first patriarch and the 15th head. Bowser's face darkened, and he repeated the word reincarnation like he couldn't quite accept it. Bowser rose from his chair and looked at Jilphas Eldragon's portrait. It was the image of the Eldragon family's first patriarch. Under his breath, he muttered the word reincarnation, then rejected it as absurd. Mentric and the captain beside him stayed silent until Balza gave a faint smirk. Balza smirked and said if Zeke was really that strong, the Kerberos mutts weren't a threat at all. A week later, Eldragon soldiers were already waiting at the special rift. Freya looked for the Black Dragon Corps vice-captain, but a soldier told her he had vanished without anyone noticing. Another soldier rushed over right away. He told the others to spread out and find him. Freya added that reinforcements were supposed to be here too, and she was worried this could become a problem. Then she spotted a group coming and said it looked like they had finally shown up. As they got closer, Freya pointed out that if they had run the whole way, they would have made it sooner. She asked if they knew that. Laika calmly answered that they weren't going to waste all their energy before the mission started. Then she called her instructor Freya and asked why she was here. Freya said she was on duty now, not acting as an instructor. She explained that she had been sent to protect the special rift and the area around it. Laika realized this was the special domain, and Freya explained that some rifts affect the outside world and create one around them. This rift was one of them. Looking at the black trees, Zeke remembered the anger boar he had fought before. The dark mist felt exactly the same, so he figured that Beast's power had probably come from a rift too. Zeke asked why Freya was guarding the place herself. She said it was to watch the Kerberos family and ruin their plans. When Laika asked what she meant, Freya said clearing the rift and getting the magic water would greatly boost the Eldragon family's army, and Kerberos wanted to stop that. She also said monsters were being pushed out of the domain. When MC asked what that meant, Freya explained that only 7 3-star fighters could enter this special rift. Aegis said he had heard that before too. To prove it, Freya touched the barrier and was instantly pushed back. She explained that anyone above that rank gets rejected. The same rule applied to monsters. Anything 4-star or higher couldn't go in. It was first come, first served until the team inside either cleared the rift or died. No one else could enter. When Zeke reached for the barrier, he could tell it chose who was allowed in. He also remembered hearing it couldn't be broken by force, but that just made him want to test it. Seeing his face, Freya got nervous and warned him to actually listen when people explained things. Zeke just winked and gave a thumbs up, saying he had heard her. Freya knew he hadn't. She told them to go in now if they were ready since the Kerberos group could arrive at any time. Then she asked if they were set. Laika and the others said they were ready. Without waiting, they entered the special domain, and Freya wished them luck. Inside, animals twisted by the black mist attacked the team at once. Vanille met one head-on with his new weapon. Using his wind source power, he brought it down with one heavy blow and smashed its head. Alan clapped excitedly and praised Lord Vanille for being amazing as always. But Vanille said nothing and kept staring at the strange weapon in his hand. Aegis clicked his tongue as he remembered seeing Zeke and Vanille talking before the mission. Back then, Vanille had asked what he had given him. The protagonist said he planned to train him just like he had promised during their last fight. After taking the weapon, Vanille asked if Zeke was serious. MC said he always meant what he said. Since this mission was a rare chance for real battle, he wanted Vanille to use the staff. That made Vanille angry. He asked if he really expected him to use a weapon he'd never touched on a mission this important. The protagonist said yes without hesitation, which only made Vanille madder. He threw the staff down and accused Zeke of making fun of him. Then he turned to leave, saying he wouldn't use something that weird. Before he got far, MC poured wind source power into the staff. Feeling that wind aura behind him, Vanille turned around and asked why he was using wind energy. The protagonist brushed that off and told him to use it. Vanille refused again, still annoyed, but Zeke kept pushing no matter how many times he said no. In the end, Vanille got so frustrated he dropped to his knees and said they were getting nowhere. He brought up the umbrella comment from the selection exam, and Zeke said yes. MC explained that since there were no umbrellas here, the staff would work as a replacement because it handled in a similar way. For now, at least, Vanille would train with that instead. As Vanille got up, he asked how he was supposed to train with a weapon he didn't know at all. He pointed out that he didn't even have the basics. Zeke, though, confidently told him not to worry because he had already made a fighting style just for him, the Ghost Umbrella style. He just thought that sounded ridiculous. Making up a martial art from nothing wasn't easy. But watching Vanille fight now, he could see the moves were cleaner than before and matched his wind aura perfectly. Even Vanille started wondering if he had really made a whole new style for him. He praised his last hit, and Alan excitedly asked if the Ghost Wind Umbrella style was real. When he said it was, Alan and Vanille looked at each other, and Alan asked what kind of person the protagonist was to create martial arts so easily. Vanille admitted he had no clue. Nearby, Lila had been listening in silence. When Zeke noticed, he asked if her name was Lila. She said it was. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Lila asked if MC had really created that new style. Like always, he casually said yes. And when she asked how, he just answered that it was obvious because he was Zeke. Layla clapped in wonder, but Sandy scoffed and said the protagonist was talking nonsense again. She insisted nobody could invent a martial art from scratch. He just jumped in and said, after what they'd seen, it somehow wasn't that hard to believe. Then Sandy turned to Vanille and warned him not to hold them back no matter what new style he had. Annoyed, Vanille told her to say that again. Sandy mocked him, saying he couldn't even fight right without poisoning people, and asked if he really planned to trust a style he'd barely learned on this mission. That quickly turned into a full argument. Alan, who had stayed quiet until then, finally told Sandy to watch her mouth. She didn't care. Sandy asked if the truth stung, then said if Alan was Vanille's attendant, he should control his master. Laika stepped in fast and told her to stop. Aegis reminded them that this was no time to fight. They were one team in a dangerous place and had to work together. Sandy still refused. She said she couldn't trust people who had poisoned Laika and almost killed her. With her eyes glowing, she declared she'd hated this team setup from the start. While the arguing went on, Zeke quietly asked Lila if she was really fine with all this. Lila said it didn't bother her. She was just happy to be on the mission. MC laughed and said she had a big heart, while Sandy kept pushing the issue and questioned why Laika had brought Vanille and Alan. Laika hesitated but admitted she had doubts too. Still, their strength made them important to the mission. Alan agreed and praised Laika's choice, though he still slipped in a jab at Sandy, which made her even angrier. As things heated up again, Laika started wondering if this team had really been the right choice. Watching all of it, Zeke realized the selection matches were still affecting them. At this rate, they would never trust each other. He also noticed that under Vanille's attitude, something inside him was still unsettled. He knew this shaky team was dangerous. But if they learned to understand and accept each other, they might become comrades who could trust each other with their lives. As they moved toward the center of the domain, they noticed a bright light ahead. Laika excitedly told everyone to head over. Zeke studied it and said it had to be the rift itself since it looked like space was cracking apart. Getting serious, Laika warned that once they went in, anything could happen. She told everyone to stay alert. Zeke clenched his hands, excited, and agreed. Then the protagonist's eyes lit up when he sensed someone new entering the domain from far away. But when Layla asked if something was wrong, he paused and casually said it was nothing. He urged everyone to hurry into the rift. The moment they stepped inside, Laika froze in shock. Edges looked down, terrified, while Sandy was already screaming. They were falling out of the sky straight toward the forest below. Trying to stay calm, Laika told everyone to get a grip so they could land safely. But before she could take charge, she saw a giant bird-like creature with its beak clamped around Zeke's head. Sandy shouted in panic, and Laika yelled MC's name. He, somehow calm, remarked that he hadn't expected this. Laika snapped that this was no time for jokes and told him to get serious, but Zeke casually answered that he was off duty. Edges called out to Laika and reminded her that surviving the fall came first. As the ground rushed up, he nervously asked what they should do. Laika clicked her tongue, unable to think of an answer that fast. Vanille lost patience and snapped that they were all useless before ordering Alan to use his wind source power. Taking charge, Vanille used his ghost wind umbrella style to control the air above them and slow the fall. Alan followed with his wind-rending fan arts, using whirlwind impact and wind wall to build an air cushion below them and cut their speed even more. As they got close to the ground, Edges grabbed a thick branch while Vanille and Alan landed with help from their wind techniques. Laika, Lila, and Sandy weren't so lucky. They slammed into the ground face first. Sandy jumped up and snapped at Vanille, asking why he couldn't make the landing softer. He just shrugged it off and said it wasn't his problem. After climbing down, Edges pointed out that Vanille and Alan had already saved them from a much worse crash. Lila winced and said it still hurt, but at least she was alive. Trying to catch his breath, Edges ran through the mess they had just survived, getting pulled into the rift, falling from the sky, and then watching a giant bird carry Zeke off. He let out a sigh and said entering a rift was way rougher than he thought. Since they had no clue what came next, he told everyone to drink their healing potions now. Sandy and Lila took theirs right away. Laika then thanked Vanille and Alan, admitting they had just saved the whole group. That caught both Alan and Vanille off guard. Vanille looked away and muttered that losing people and failing the mission would only make things worse. Sandy folded her arms and said he could at least take a thank you. Trying to get everyone focused again, Alan asked what they should do next and brought up that the protagonist had been taken somewhere. Vanille, looking grim, said they could just leave the protagonist behind. Lila quickly asked if he was actually worried, but Vanille brushed her off and hid what he really felt. Sandy scoffed and told him he was awful at being honest. To her surprise, Edges agreed with Vanille. He said worrying about Zeke right now was probably pointless. Sandy, annoyed, asked how he could side with Vanille, but Laika calmly backed them up. If anyone could handle himself, it was MC. In fact, she thought they were the ones in bigger danger. Sandy went quiet for a second, then asked what they all even thought about him. One by one, they remembered how insanely strong he was, and almost together they called Zeke a monster. Sandy blinked, wondering if she was the weird one for not seeing him that way. Edges added that they still had to meet up with the protagonist later. But right now, their real problem was that they had no idea where to go. Just then, Lila called out to Edges and said she had seen a pillar of light in the distance while they were falling. Alan said he saw it too, but after all that chaos, he lost track of where it was. Then Lila pointed straight ahead and said the light was that way. Alan stared at her and asked if she really kept track of direction while falling. Lila said yes. She took one quick look around and memorized it. Laika added that the bird carrying Zeke had flown toward that same light. So even though they still needed to regroup with him, their best move for now was to head for the pillar. She said there was no way MC would pass up something that strange, and Vanille and Edges agreed right away. Meanwhile, Zeke was still being carried through the air by the giant bird. Instead of panicking, he found it interesting. The mission had gone off the rails the second they entered the rift. Even he admitted he had never felt something coming from beyond dimensions before, so this was worth experiencing. Though he was separated from Laika and the others, he trusted they would manage. All of a sudden, the bird stopped in midair. Zeke casually asked if their little flight was over, but instead of answering, the bird dropped him. As he started falling again, the protagonist guessed they had reached the destination. Below him was a huge nest with 3 baby birds inside. They chirped loudly. And when Zeke looked closer, he saw them drooling like they couldn't wait. That was when it hit him. He wasn't a passenger. He was about to be lunch. Before MC could become the next meal for the chicks, he smacked all 3 away, then nailed the mother bird with a hard layered bump to the head. He muttered that he had almost gotten eaten the moment he arrived. The mother bird teared up, one side of her face twitching as she reeled from the hit, while the chicks chirped in panic. Zeke walked to the cliff's edge and looked around, realizing he had really been thrown into a crazy new world. Then he remembered the warning about chaos inside the rift. Looking back at the birds, he wondered if they were the monsters he had heard about. The birds instantly chirped in protest and shook their heads like they understood him. Somehow getting the message, he crouched and gently touched the mother bird's feathers. To him, they looked way too cute and harmless to be chaos monsters. But when he examined them more closely, he saw how bad things were. The birds were skinny, filthy, badly worn down, and covered in old wounds. Zeke wondered what had left them in such terrible shape. But before he could think more, he sensed something nearby. He muttered that he had felt a strange presence following them for a while. And right then, a group of creatures shot toward them at high speed. The mother bird screeched a warning. And when Zeke turned, he finally saw them clearly. Several bug-like monsters wrapped in dark purple energy rushed the cliff with a giant mantis behind them, giving off an even nastier feeling. As soon as they landed, the giant mantis let out a sharp hiss that rang across the mountain. Even then, the protagonist only stared at the monsters with interest, not fear. A glance at the shaking birds behind him told him these insects had been hunting them the whole time. Even that alone was weird enough, but the rotten aura around them made it clear these were the real chaos monsters. At a glance, Zeke judged the locusts as 3-star monsters and the giant mantis as a 4-star one. MC quietly sized things up, and with the birds so starved they could barely stand, he couldn't decide right away. Should he leave them and escape alone or stay and help fight the chaos monsters? Before he could choose, the birds spread their wings and chirped fiercely. Hurt or not, the mother bird stepped forward, ready to protect her chicks even if it killed her. Seeing that determination, seeing them still stand and fight while cornered, Zeke glanced at the little ones and admitted he liked their spirit, so he decided to help them, at least for now. The instant the chaos monsters rushed in, Zeke felt their killing intent press against his skin. It was like they lived only to destroy. Calm as ever, he noted that this was what real chaos felt like. When one locust monster lunged at him, he moved first and caught it by the neck. Holding it there, he loosened his grip for just a moment before driving out a brutal punch that tore its head clean off. Blood sprayed across the protagonist's face and body as a faint green light flickered in his eyes. But instead of backing off, the remaining chaos monsters only got angrier after one of them died. The mother bird chirped nervously, sensing the swarm's rising rage. Then the whole group charged Zeke at once, but before they could reach him, his eyes flared with bright golden light, and above him appeared the huge phantom shape of a dragon's eye. A crushing wave of dragon aura burst from Zeke and slammed into the chaos monsters hard enough to stop even the 4-star mantis cold. With one eye glowing gold, MC pointed at the swarm and told them to turn back now. If they retreated, he would let them live. But if they still wanted to fight, he said he would stay with them for as long as he felt like it. The giant mantis seemed to understand what was hidden inside that pressure. It lowered its head, shook nervously, and wouldn't meet his eyes. Zeke said they had chosen wisely and told them to get lost. Crushed by the dragon aura, the chaos monsters fled as fast as they could. Watching them run, he noticed that even their retreat looked weirdly dramatic. Still, he didn't care much. The fight was already over. As he wiped sweat from his face, Zeke realized using dragon pressure in his weakened state was still tiring. The mother bird chirped softly to get his attention, then bowed her head and pointed her beak at the dead chaos monster nearby, while the chicks chirped excitedly beside her. A little confused, the protagonist wondered what they wanted, then realized they were asking if they could eat the body. He told them to go ahead if they wanted. The chicks immediately rushed over and tore into the dead locust. As Zeke watched them eat, he slowly figured out what must have happened. The starving mother bird had probably gone into the forest looking for food for her babies, got jumped by chaos insects, and barely made it back alive. Then while fleeing, she had luckily grabbed what she thought was prey, only for that prey to be him. Once the chicks finished eating, they quickly fell asleep from exhaustion. As Zeke watched them sleep, he thought that even if they had almost used him as bait, maybe meeting them still meant something. At that point, he decided he had to do something for them. He asked the mother bird if they were still hungry, and she only tilted her head, not getting what he meant. Then MC suddenly declared that they were going hunting. The mother bird gave a loud shocked chirp the second she heard that. Zeke grinned and said he'd train her himself so she'd never struggle to feed her chicks again. Deep in the mountains, inside the rift, another team was cutting down every chaos monster in its way. Soon, the Kerberos members appeared. One of them checked a pocket watch and looked up at the rift rising into the sky. After straightening his hat, he told the others that with the nearby chaos monsters cleared out, it was time to start hunting the lizard. A week later, Sandy cut down another wave of the twisted monsters and finally lost it, yelling about what kind of nightmare they had been dropped into. Vanille quickly told her to lower her voice and quit screaming. He said she'd done more screaming this past week than sword swinging. Meanwhile, Edges noticed the chaos monsters just kept coming. Even after they had been fighting for a full week, there was no end in sight. Lila, looking worn out, agreed and said she was beyond tired of chaos monsters. Edges just laughed. Then he cut down another insect-like creature and looked over at Laika. Wrapped in golden aura, Laika rushed forward with her great sword and fired off Thunder Net Annihilation. Golden lightning exploded out and erased all the chaos creatures around her. Once the last monsters dropped, she wiped away her sweat and asked if everyone was still okay. Watching her, Edges was impressed she could still move after using that much power. Still, he worried she might be pushing herself too hard just because she was the leader. Sandy walked up to Laika and loudly said she was definitely not okay, adding that this was easily the worst thing she had ever gone through. Then she asked if every rift was like this. Laika shook her head and explained that each rift led to a different mixed realm, and every world beyond them was dangerous. Edges grabbed Sandy's shoulder and said she had just been unlucky, especially since she hated bugs so much. The second he touched her, she shuddered in disgust. She instantly started yelling at him again. But when Laika calmly called her name, Sandy stopped and admitted that complaining would not finish the mission. Edges laughed, secretly glad Laika was around to keep Sandy in check. He looked at the others and said it would be nice to finally get out of the forest. Right then, Vanille sensed something odd and slowly turned around. Using wind aura to check the area, he realized the airflow had changed and said the exit had to be close. Still doubtful, Sandy asked if he was sure, then warned him not to come near her while covered in nasty bug guts. Annoyed, Vanille snapped that he had no reason to lie after putting up with a whole week of her non-stop screaming. Even so, Sandy smiled, relieved that her bug nightmare might finally be over. The group immediately ran through the forest as fast as they could. Following the way Vanille pointed, they soon spotted a bright light ahead. Sandy and Laika lit up when they realized they had finally found the exit and could leave the awful forest behind. Feeling like this was the luckiest moment of her life, Sandy rushed ahead and happily said goodbye to the disgusting bugs. But her smile vanished the second she stepped out of the forest and saw nothing but a huge rocky land ahead. While the pillar of light was still far off in the distance, Sandy immediately asked what they were supposed to do now. Edges let out a sigh and said this looked like a whole new problem waiting for them. Staring at the giant purple pillar of light, Alan pointed out it was the same one they had seen while falling into the rift. Lila agreed and said they were much closer now. Laika asked if the light was what she thought it was, and Edges said yes. Now that they were this close, he said it was clear the light was coming from the Chaos Stone their teacher had mentioned. A few days earlier, before the special rift mission left the Eldragon estate, Metric had told them that getting the magic water alone would not be enough to finish the job. Zeke asked what else they had to do, and Laika explained that clearing the rift also meant closing it. Metric agreed. He added that they had to destroy the Chaos Stone keeping the rift open. When he mentioned it, he remembered reading about it before. Edges explained that the Chaos Stone was or believed to cause rifts around the world. Curious, Zeke asked Mentric whether the Chaos Stone was only the source of the rift, but Mentric shook his head and said it was far worse. The Chaos Stone itself was the real danger inside every rift. Pointing to a picture in the book, Mentric explained that the Chaos Stone constantly gave off huge amounts of energy to keep the rift open. That energy slowly consumed the mixed realm around it and turned living things into chaos creatures, and chaos had only one instinct: slaughter. They would keep killing and devouring entire worlds, then move on to the next one. If they found a way through the rift, they would cross over and invade Earth. Sandy said that sounded awful, especially since they had to find both the magic water and the Chaos Stone. But Edges told her it was not quite that bad. Showing her another picture, he explained that magic water naturally formed near Chaos Stones. Mentric confirmed it and told them to look for the Chaos Stone first. Even though every Chaos Stone looked different, they all shared one trait. They gave off strong energy, so anyone close enough would know. Back in the rift, Vanille pointed at the huge pillar of light and said all they had to do now was follow it to the source. Sandy glanced at Vanille and Alan, secretly surprised they were talking about something besides garbage for once. But when Vanille asked what she was staring at, she ignored him. Edges said it would be perfect if they ran into Zeke near the Chaos Stone. Meanwhile, Laika quietly hoped the protagonist had already found the Chaos Stone. Layla looked at Vanille and asked if he was worried about MC, but before she could finish, Vanille told her to shut up. Sandy happily said at least there were no bugs out here, unlike that nightmare forest. Layla agreed. After fighting bugs for a whole week, she was worn out too. Edges quickly warned them not to relax. Based on what they had been told, strong chaos monsters usually gathered near Chaos Stones after being warped by its energy. Vanille clicked his tongue and called it a pain. At the same time, Laika suddenly felt a bad chill and warned everyone to stay sharp as they moved toward the pillar of light. The group carefully crossed the rocky ground, and after a while, even Vanille and the others were surprised that they had made it this far without any trouble. When they reached the giant Chaos Stone, giving off a dark purple aura, its size and evil energy left them stunned. Feeling oddly bold, Sandy asked where all the monsters were and said this was starting to feel anticlimactic. Then a huge beetle-like shadow suddenly jumped across the cliffs above them. Laika sensed it at once and warned everyone something was overhead. The group instantly drew their weapons and searched the cliffs. Then an explosion suddenly burst out right in front of them. Laika braced for a fight. But when the smoke cleared, they were stunned to see Zeke standing there, casually waving with a bright smile. Everyone felt instant relief seeing that he was safe. Aside from Vanille and Alan, the others hurried over, saying how glad they were to see him alive. Zeke smiled and said he was happy to see them too, adding that they still looked full of life. Vanille, looking totally drained, asked if they really looked lively at all, while Lila admitted they were already completely spent. Only then did he really notice how exhausted everyone looked. But before he could say anything else, Alan cut in and pointed behind Zeke, asking if what he was seeing was real. The protagonist paused, then looked back and casually said he had accidentally killed it a little earlier. The moment Sandy saw the giant dead beetle, every hair on her body stood up, and she screamed in horror at the huge monster Zeke had beaten. Edges guessed it was the strong chaos monster they had heard about and asked if MC had really killed it alone. MC casually said it attacked first, so he dealt with it. After hearing that, Laika asked if the reason they had not seen any chaos monsters on the way was because he had already cleared them out. He just said he might have taken care of a few, so that was probably why. Hearing him talk about killing terrifying chaos monsters like it was nothing, the group was reminded all over again that the protagonist was insane. MC pointed at the huge rock behind him and asked if it was the chaos stone they had been looking for. He said it seemed important, so he waited there for them. Edges immediately confirmed it was definitely a chaos stone. Then he pointed under it and asked if the glowing liquid there was the water they needed. Caught off guard, Laika asked what water he meant. Zeke stepped up to the chaos stone and pointed at the glowing liquid under it. Then he touched it with a finger, looking curious. Seeing that, Laika quickly pulled out several bottles and said there was way more magic water than she expected. While Laika filled the bottles, Aegis explained that someone had to drink a certain amount to get the full effect, and even this might only be enough for a few people. Sandy, worn out, cut him off and told Laika to hurry so they could get out of there. When Laika finished, she studied the bottles and said the rumors claimed the color of magic water decided what kind of magic a person could awaken, but the water they gathered looked almost clear. Aegis checked another bottle and corrected her, saying it did have a strange color. Sandy agreed, and Layla said it did look odd. Vanille and Alan argued that no matter what color it was definitely real magic water. While they were still talking, Zeke suddenly sensed danger and reacted at once. He grabbed Laika and yanked her to the ground. She asked what was going on, but the next second, a golden beam tore past them. It blew up the spot where Laika had been standing. She instantly understood that Zeke had just saved her life. A moment later, a group of men came out from the rocks. Their leader, the one who launched the sneak attack, mocked how those little lizards had managed to avoid it. Aegis and the others drew their weapons at once, ready to fight the Kerberos group. The protagonist just smiled, excited for the fight, and said it took them long enough to show up. He repeated that the men in black were late. That made their leader ask what he meant. Sandy still had no idea who these men were, but Aegis felt a chill as he realized how bad this ambush was. Right away, he suspected they were from the Kerberos family. Aegis remembered Freya's warning. Only 7 fighters below 3-star could enter the rift, so no one else should have been able to get in. His face darkened. He couldn't understand how the Kerberos family got inside when all 7 spots were already taken. Worse, the group in front of them clearly had 4-star fighters and even a 5-star leader with crushing pressure. Then the leader calmly said he knew they were wondering how they entered the rift. He raised a golden bracelet with a green gem set in it. When Laika guessed the bracelet was the reason, the leader explained it was a bracelet of deception, a rare one-use treasure that let someone slip past special rift entry rules. The higher the user's star rank, the stronger the bracelet had to be, and the gem decided the highest rank it could hide. It was a rare item the Kerberos family got through secret channels, and it vanished after one use. Aegis could barely believe it existed, while Vanille pointed his staff at them and asked if they were stupid for sharing that. The leader only checked his pocket watch and coldly said it didn't matter. Everyone there was going to die in the rift anyway. The instant he snapped the watch shut, Zeke felt danger again and shoved Laika away. Before she understood what happened, the leader fired a surprise rock cannon. A stone wrapped in golden energy shot through the air and smashed into Zeke as he raised his arms to block. Laika cried out in shock. Before she could do anything else, one of the men in black rushed her with his sword up. Her body froze as she felt death coming. But before the blade hit, Vanille shoved her back and caught the strike with his wand. The blow was so heavy that Vanille was forced down to one knee. Even then, he told Laika not to lose focus. Then he blasted out Wind Aura and sent the attacker flying. But before Laika's group could fight back, the Kerberos members set up another attack and used Rock Bullet. Stones rained at them from all directions. Aegis and Lila swung to knock the rocks away, while Sandy and Alan desperately dodged and defended. At the same time, Laika drew her greatsword and stepped in front of Vanille, slammed it into the ground, and used lightning to shield him too. But the second the enemy saw her lightning aura, several Kerberos fighters cut through her defense and rushed in close. Vaniel gave a bitter grin as Laika warned everyone that the enemy was already on them. Sandy gripped her greatsword and said they'd face them head-on. But when Aegis didn't answer, she realized the problem. They had been pushed too far apart and their formation was broken. Alan told Sandy the enemy had split them on purpose. Their party was now divided into 3 smaller teams, and each pair was up against a 4-star Kerberos fighter by themselves. Sweat rolled down Aegis's face as he asked if they really were from the Kerberos family and if they came for the magic water. The leader only replied that he had nothing to say to someone like him. Aegis fell silent. Laika worried about Zeke but forced herself to focus. Thinking about him now would only get her killed, especially against enemies like these. For star fighters were on a whole different level. A normal person could train their whole life and maybe reach 3-star, but 4-star was for people born with real talent. The gap between 3-star and 4-star was huge. Laika also knew for sure that the enemy leader was a 5-star fighter. Even if they beat the enemies in front of them, the moment that leader stepped in, it would be over. And his earlier attack was clearly magic, so the leader was likely a powerful mage too. Then he snapped his fingers and ordered his men to finish the lizards. They obeyed at once, and purple energy burst from the ground as they used a summoning spell. A savage beast rose from the magic circle, a giant hound with glowing purple eyes. Laika stared in shock, and even Aegis could hardly believe they could summon monsters. Sandy gaped at the creatures and asked if they were really dogs, but Alan quickly said they were monsters, 3-star ones. Laika clenched her teeth as she felt their situation getting worse by the second. Then Zeke suddenly showed up again. Standing firm, he lifted a huge boulder with one hand that instantly caught the leader's attention. Without warning, MC planted his foot, turned his body to build force, and hurled the boulder straight at the leader. The leader jumped aside, and the boulder exploded against the rock wall behind him. He narrowed his eyes and asked how Zeke could still move after taking that magic head-on, but he only sounded disappointed, saying he had hoped to see what that so-called magic could really do. He casually bounced the giant boulder in one hand like it weighed nothing. With a mocking look, the protagonist asked if tossing little rocks was all they could do. Laika quickly asked if he was okay, and Zeke answered with a wide grin. His eyes gave off a faint glow as he tapped the boulder again before twisting his body and throwing it at the leader even harder than before. The leader clicked his tongue when he saw the rock flying at him so fast. Still, he barely dodged by jumping to the side. After that, he heard Zeke casually say that if this fight was just about throwing rocks, then he could play that game too. The leader glared at MC and cursed him as a little bastard. As he rolled his shoulders, the enemy leader admitted his toughness was unexpected. But after glancing at his pocket watch, he calmly said Zeke would still meet the same end. He used his ability at once and summoned another beast. Violent purple aura surged up as a monster appeared. Its glowing eyes locked right onto the protagonist. But instead of fear, MC looked thrilled. He wondered if magic really could summon monsters and said magic was amazing. The leader could only stare, unable to make sense of him. The leader and his summon showed off their 4-star and 5-star power, asking if Zeke still didn't get how badly outmatched he and his team were. He paused, then admitted the situation really was pretty bad for him and the others right now. That answer even made the leader go quiet for a moment. Then the protagonist smiled and looked up like he was waiting for something. Right then, a loud chirp rang across the battlefield and shook the area. The enemies and their monsters looked up at once. Laika and Vanille did too, and their foes immediately started cursing. Several birds were diving down from the sky at incredible speed, their eyes glowing gold as they came in with crushing force. In a flash, the smaller birds dropped right in front of Zeke's group. Laika was so stunned she could barely process what she was seeing. The enemy leader and his summoned beast stayed on guard, watching the new arrivals carefully. Then the mother bird stepped up and let out a sharp, powerful chirp. That cry was so fierce, Zeke's group started wondering if these things were really birds. The enemy leader quickly realized they were creatures native to the rift. MC casually patted the mother bird and said she showed up at the perfect time. He even asked if she and the others had eaten enough during the hunt, like he understood her completely. The mother bird chirped back happily, and Aegis could only stare in disbelief. Aegis immediately demanded an explanation. After a short pause, he calmly said the birds were actually his disciples. The smaller birds answered with loud chirps as if backing him up. Sandy and Alan were left speechless by the claim. The protagonist explained that while the others were away, he had been taking care of the birds. During that time, he trained them by making them run with huge boulders on their backs. He also beat them every day so they'd learn how to endure attacks. On top of that, he taught them to eat whenever food was around. To Zeke, eating was part of getting stronger too. Compared to before, the birds were much tougher and stronger now. The mother bird proudly flared her golden aura and chirped like she agreed. Laika had to ask if MC had really been raising the birds and if they were his disciples just like the rest of them. Sandy was still trying to wrap her head around it. She couldn't help wondering what Zeke had been doing the whole time they were gone. He ignored the questions and looked at the mother bird instead. He apologized for asking so suddenly, then asked if she and her flock were up for a little exercise after eating. All he wanted was for them to handle the mutts for him. The birds chirped at once and turned their threatening stares on the enemy beasts. But the leader of the mutts suddenly howled and sent its pack charging in. The mother bird answered with a strong chirp and led her flock straight into the rushing monsters. Zeke watched the birds and monsters clash with a grin, while the enemy leader kept his full attention on him. Even with the fight raging behind them, the protagonist stayed calm and said the bird disciples had changed things. Now they finally had the power to face their enemies head-on. Then he asked if the enemy leader agreed. The reply was a drawn sword. Advancing on MC, the enemy leader scoffed at the idea that a few birds could matter. Calling him a lizard, he warned Zeke not to get carried away and suddenly lunged, driving his sword right at him. He barely dodged in time. Laika panicked when she saw a 5-star enemy go straight for the protagonist, but Vaniel snapped at her and told her to focus on the enemy in front of them. She tried to argue, but Vaniel cut her off. If she kept worrying about MC, they'd never win this fight. First, she needed to worry about staying alive herself. Realizing he was right, Laika quickly apologized. She turned her full focus back to the enemy in front of her. Then Laika declared that their first job was taking down the one blocking their way. Their opponent couldn't understand where that confidence came from. He warned that if they kept wasting time, their friend would die. But Laika fired back that she'd help Zeke after beating him first. Annoyed, the enemy brushed it off as childish nonsense. He dragged his sword along the ground, then used the Earthhound sword-style technique landslide to launch a heavy attack. Laika raised her greatsword in time and blocked it. Seeing the opening, Vaniel clenched his teeth, gathered wind aura, and fired Pierce Gale from the side. As it hit, Laika caught her chance and followed with her greatsword art, Lightning Flash. Golden lightning slammed into the enemy and drove him back. Still, he reacted fast and stabbed his sword into the ground to stop himself. Under their coordinated pressure, Vanille striking from range and Laika attacking up close, he became sure they were the children of the Eldrigan family head. Laika and Vanille were both irritated. Even after taking both attacks, the enemy only had a few light scratches. The gap in strength was absurd. Then Laika suddenly turned to Vanille and smiled. She said with total confidence that as long as Vanille fought beside her, they could win. That caught Vanille off guard for a second. He quickly looked away and refocused on their enemy. Laika still believed they would bring him down in the end, and the enemy was just as sure he would kill the Eldrigon head's children before this was over. At the same time, Aegis wrapped his sword in golden aura and charged. The enemy easily jumped back to avoid it. After making space, he used Rock Bullet and fired at once. Aegis saw it coming, tightened his grip, and got ready to block. Just then, Leela's wand lit up with purple energy as she cast Heavenly Chime Arts. Strong shock waves rushed toward the enemy, but before they could hit, he threw up a huge rock wall and stopped them. Without pausing, he climbed onto the wall and jumped from the top. Dropping toward Lila, he coated his sword with Earthhound power and used Landslide Slash. Before it could reach her, Aegis rushed in from the side, his sword glowing gold again, and fired a light blade attack. To the enemy's surprise, it landed and wounded the 4-star fighter. He grit his teeth and yelled in frustration, furious that a low-level brat like Aegis had tagged him. He answered with another rock bullet, then jumped back again to widen the gap. At the same time, Leela rushed in and tried to follow up with Rolling Wave from her Wave Echo Staff Arts, but their opponent was too sharp. He noticed her right away, and before she could strike, the ground under Leela started shaking. Her eyes widened when she realized she couldn't move. The enemy had used Earthbind to lock her in place. Then he immediately sent a barrage of rock bullets at her. Leela blocked with her staff, but the force shoved her back. Aegis called out to her in alarm. The enemy didn't let up. He used Landslide Slash again and rushed straight at Aegis. Aegis was a little slow to react, but he still got his sword up in time to block. Even so, he knew that if this kept going, his weapon wouldn't hold much longer. Cracks were already spreading across the blade. The enemy could barely believe Aegis had survived another hit. He answered by summoning rock needles, sending stone spikes at Aegis from all sides. The instant Aegis noticed the trap, he kicked the enemy in the stomach and used the recoil to jump away, barely escaping the spikes. Looking at his damaged sword, Aegis muttered that he'd expected a 4-star enemy to be this strong. Leela quickly agreed. Then Aegis studied the man's attacks and tried to figure out what kind of sword style he was using. The slashes were hard to read, almost like Vanille's wind attacks, but they also hit with weight like Laika's blows. Even so, Aegis couldn't sense any special power in the enemy's aura that made him start thinking the man was boosting his sword with magic. If that was true, his abilities were even more dangerous than they looked. Aegis instantly ran through ideas in his head, searching for a way to beat him. Just then, Leela asked if he was okay, and Aegis told her he could still keep going. She warned him the enemy's sword was dangerous, and Aegis agreed. He didn't know how much longer his own blade could take those hits. Then Lila pointed out something important. Whenever the enemy used magic, his sword seemed to react, then go back to looking normal. If this kept up, Aegis' sword would probably break first. As Lila kept watching the enemy, Aegis suddenly figured it out. He told her right away that he finally knew how to beat him. The enemy smirked and mocked them, asking if their little planning session was over. Aegis only smiled back, completely sure of himself. That confidence got under the enemy's skin, and he demanded to know what was so funny. Still smiling, Aegis said he'd realized something. The fight was winnable and they could take him down. The enemy stepped in at once, saying Aegis was way too bold for a mere 3-star fighter. As he attacked again, he barked at Aegis to disappear already. Aegis raised his sword and blocked. The enemy poured all his magic into the blow, making it even stronger as he mocked Aegis for getting cocky and called him 3-star trash. The force drove Aegis down to one knee, but he gritted his teeth and held on with everything he had. At that moment, Leela jumped in to catch the enemy off guard, but he noticed her right away. He mocked her, saying he could see every move and every attack she made. Then as the magic around the enemy's sword faded, Aegis's eyes flashed. His plan was finally complete. With a small grin, Aegis told him he could read his movements too, then he released his full power. The enemy's sword was knocked aside in an instant, and Aegis used the secret art of the 1,000-blade style. Golden aura burst around his sword as he put everything into the strike and unleashed the 5-edge ultimate blade straight into the enemy's chest, blasting him away. Blood spilled from the enemy's mouth, and he could barely process what just happened. A 4-star fighter had lost to someone at 3 stars. A moment later, Aegis dropped to one knee, worn out. Lila rushed over and asked if he was okay. With a weak smile, Aegis said he was somehow still up. More than anything, he was just glad they found an opening. Layla asked what opening he meant. Aegis told her she was the one who found it. Still puzzled, Leela asked if she had really said something that important. Then Aegis explained. When she noticed the enemy's sword went back to normal every time he used magic, she had pointed out his weak spot without knowing it. If the enemy couldn't use magic and sword skills at the same time, then there had to be a tiny gap when he switched between them. Aegis said all he did was wait for that split second and attack. Lila finally understood and clapped with a smile, saying that sounded just like a genius like Aegis. But Aegis quickly shut that down. He said they only won because of her. He thanked Lila for spotting it and helping him. After that, Aegis went to check how the others were doing in their fights. Somewhere else, Sandy charged her opponent with golden lightning running over her sword. As soon as she got close, she used lightning flash. Thunder burst out and sparks blasted across the field. Their enemy grit his teeth and blocked it. At the same time, Alan swung his fan and fired a gale bullet at the enemy, but Sandy quickly realized Alan's aim was off. Because of that, she nearly got hit too. She instantly yelled at Alan, saying he almost dragged her into his attack and asking if he even knew what he was doing. Alan shot back that Sandy was taking too long. Annoyed, Sandy asked what that was supposed to mean. Before they could keep arguing, a huge blast cut them off. Sandy and Alan turned forward when their enemy warned that they were standing way too close together and should get ready. Both of them quickly raised their guard. Alan put up a wind wall, while Sandy knocked away the incoming rock bullets with her greatsword. After that, Sandy admitted 4-star fighters were seriously tough. Alan agreed, but said the fight was even harder because Sandy kept getting in his way. Sandy fired right back, saying Alan was the real problem and messing up her attacks. He brushed that off and reminded her he'd been covering for her every time she slipped. Still, Sandy wouldn't let it go and kept blaming Alan. The enemy stayed quiet for a second, then attacked again while they were still bickering. Using Stone Spike, he sent a surprise strike straight at Sandy. Alan saw it at once, used Storm Blade, and cut the spikes apart before they reached her. Then he told Sandy she'd lost focus again. He warned her to pay attention, but Sandy snapped back that she already saw the attack coming. The enemy mocked them, asking if they really thought they could win with teamwork that sloppy. He sneered that lizard brats were all the same. Sandy and Alan both went quiet for a moment. They knew he had a point. Their teamwork was still messy even if they didn't need him saying it. Alan reluctantly admitted the enemy wasn't wrong. Then Sandy smirked and shot back that for a 4-star, their opponent was actually pretty weak. She said even with shaky teamwork they still had a real shot at winning. That instantly annoyed the enemy. He said idiots like them couldn't understand the gap in power between them. Dark energy poured off him as he charged at Sandy and Alan, promising they'd drown in despair before they died. Sandy called out to Alan. Smiling with confidence, she said she could finish the enemy if Alan just backed her up. Though clearly annoyed, Alan saw the enemy rushing in and finally agreed. There was no other choice. Right away, Alan used wind-rending fan arts and launched a strong gale bullet. The enemy called it useless and said their attacks would never work on him. But before he could finish, his face changed. Alan's attack was stronger than expected, and the gale bullet swallowed his own attack. With a confident grin, Alan told Sandy he had poured extra wind aura into the move. It was strong enough to pin the enemy in place. Then he asked if that was enough. Sandy said it was more than enough. Golden lightning burst around her as she powered up again. Electricity snapping all over her body. She ordered the enemy to take this attack, then slammed him with a brutal lightning slash. Hurt and furious, the enemy cursed Sandy and Alan. Alan just called him stubborn and used Typhoon falling to dust. Wild winds swallowed their opponent whole, and all that came out were screams. When the enemy finally hit the ground, Sandy and Alan stayed on guard, realizing they had really beaten him. Sadly, that peace lasted only a moment. Alan immediately complained that Sandy always left things half done. If she said she'd beat the enemy herself, then she should have finished him. Sandy fired back at once, saying Alan should learn how to stab right. She reminded him his last attack only worked because she made the chance for it. Fed up, Alan muttered that for all her bragging, she still hadn't finished the enemy herself. Even with their opponent unconscious on the ground, Sandy and Alan kept arguing like nothing had changed. Elsewhere, a 4-star enemy kept pelting Laika and Vanille with rock bullets. As they ran and dodged, Vanille cursed him and poured wind aura into his staff. Using Ghost Wind Umbrella-style Whirlwind Impact, he struck back, but the enemy only mocked the attack. He kept pressing them without slowing down. Seeing a chance, Laika used the first secret art of her Thunder Greatsword arts, Heavenly Thunder, and jumped in for a surprise hit. But the enemy spotted her right away. With a flip of his sword, he raised a wall of earth under himself and used it to block her lightning strike. The instant Laika's attack hit, a huge burst of energy exploded across the battlefield. She refused to stop and poured even more golden lightning into her greatsword. In response, the enemy used his Earthhound sword style called Earthen Swordsman. Sand surged up from the ground and wrapped around his body, making Laika stare in shock. Even so, she kept forcing more lightning into her blade, determined to break through, but the enemy held firm. That's when Laika realized what was happening. Her lightning was being sent straight into the ground through his defense. Just when she thought she'd broken through, the enemy caught her with a sudden counter. He used Landslide Slash, forcing Laika to brace with her greatsword. Before she could recover, he drove a hard kick into her stomach. The hit sent her flying, and while she struggled to recover, the enemy moved to finish her. Before he could, he sensed something coming from behind. He barely dodged in time as a wind or a sneak attack came from his blind side. Vanille clicked his tongue, annoyed that the enemy still escaped an attack from his blind spot. Even though it missed, the attack forced the enemy to jump back and make space. Vanille and Laika used that chance to duck behind a large boulder. Laika thanked him for saving her, but Vanille looked away and said he only used the opening. He wasn't trying to help her. Laika let it go, but she knew the truth. Vanille was just too embarrassed to admit he wanted to help. Peeking out from behind the boulder, Laika's face grew serious. Things were worse than she thought. The enemy was insanely strong, probably one of the strongest at the 4-star level. As she watched him closely, Laika realized his earth-based sword style completely cancelled out her lightning aura. Worse, his earth magic kept wearing down their weapons, leaving almost no opening. The only chance she saw was when he switched between magic and sword skills. The problem was the gap lasted less than a second. Laika could tell he had trained to cover every weakness in his style. Even with the speed of her Thunder Greatsword arts, she still wasn't fast enough to use that opening every time. Vanille couldn't do it either. Vanille finally said that if they kept fighting like this, they'd never win. Laika agreed and asked if he could use poison on the enemy. That only made him more annoyed. He complained that Zeke had emptied his whole poison stock before they left for the mission, saying it wouldn't count as real training if Vanille used poison. To make it worse, he even made him clear out the real killing poison he had hidden in his own body. Hearing that, Laika could only sigh and mutter his name. She said that if so, they really had no way to use the enemy's opening. Still irritated, Vanille told her they weren't out of options yet. As soon as Laika tried to ask what he meant, the enemy found their hiding spot and mocked them for looking so relaxed. Right after that, another wave of rock bullets came at them. As they ran, Laika shouted and demanded to know the plan. Vanille said all she had to do was land her fastest attack on the enemy. Confused, Laika reminded him she wasn't fast enough to land a clean hit. Vanille calmly told her not to worry. He'd handle that part. His confidence caught Laika off guard, and she went quiet for a moment. Thinking she might not believe him, Vanille said they could drop the plan if she didn't trust him. Before he could finish, Laika smacked aside another rock bullet with her greatsword and said she trusted him. Then she said it again with no doubt at all. She trusted him completely. That caught Vanille off guard, and he went quiet. A moment later, he used his wind aura to speed away from the barrage while Laika kept blocking the attacks. The enemy sneered, saying it wouldn't matter what they tried. Then he lifted a hand. Earth spikes shot up to cut them off. Laika rushed in at once and cut down every spike in front of her. At the same time, Vanille fired off another whirlwind impact. The enemy threw up a rock wall to block it. As soon as it rose, Vanille told Laika this was her chance. She burst forward without a second of hesitation. The enemy called them idiots and said he'd turn them into pin cushions before firing another wave of rock bullets. Vanille shot back that it wasn't happening. He used his wind aura to block the barrage and cover Laika as she charged in. Once the enemy realized her rush couldn't be stopped, he readied Shatterwall as a last line of defense, but Vanille was already expecting that. Another whirlwind impact smashed the wall before it could stop her. For the first time, the enemy looked shaken. He called them fools again, saying the result wouldn't change even if they tried this 100 times. Laika kept charging, her great sword wrapped in golden lightning. Behind her, Vanille used Swift Gale and sent strong wind currents at her back. The boost hit and her eyes went wide. Finally seeing his plan, she locked in on the enemy ahead. While Vanille used his Grip Wind Umbrella arts to pull the enemy's focus, Laika activated her Lightning Greatsword arts. With a fierce shout, she unleashed Thunderclap Rush, and this time it landed. The enemy could only scream as lightning tore through his body. Golden thunder kept ripping through him until his legs gave out and he fell to his knees. A moment later, he died. After pushing past her limit, Laika dropped to one knee and leaned on her sword. She asked Vanille what he'd just done. Vanille explained that neither of them could reach the enemy in time on their own. But if he used his wind aura to speed up her movement, the two of them could beat the enemy's reaction speed. Laika let out a relieved breath when she understood. Vanille awkwardly scratched the back of his head. Then he asked why she trusted him so easily. He pointed out that he'd spent years messing with her and fighting dirty. Laika stayed quiet for a second before answering. A lot had happened between them, but even so, she chose Vanille as leader of Strike Team. For her, that was reason enough to trust him. Simple as that. She added that they only won because of him, then thanked him for real. That thanks sent a weird chill through Vanille. He looked away fast and said she had the wrong idea. He only helped because he wanted to win. Laika just smiled. Then she turned to Zeke's fight with the 5-star enemy. Right then, she froze in shock. The protagonist had been swallowed by a huge mass of earth spikes. But the next second, Zeke clenched his fist. Every spike around him burst apart into countless pieces. As the rubble fell, MC laughed loudly and said this fight was amazing. The instant he landed, he rushed the enemy with a huge grin, telling him to show even more magic. Seeing him come in, the 5-star enemy coated his sword in hardened earth with shattered stone sword arts. Rock armor, razor edge, it changed nothing. Zeke broke the stone-covered blade with one punch and blasted the enemy back with raw force. He casually told the enemy that stone armor was useless against him. Using his sword to steady himself, the enemy fired back with an earth spell called Ground Ripper. Golden energy flared as he slammed a fist into the ground. The earth split open and rushed at Zeke like a giant mouth. The protagonist braced both arms and legs against the closing walls and forced them apart. The enemy thought he'd be trapped. Instead, Zeke shot upward just before it closed, laughing that this was getting more fun every second. When he landed, he glanced over and noted that everyone else seemed done with their fights. Nearby, the mother bird gave a happy chirp after beating her opponent. The smaller birds lifted their wings proudly, saying they had won too. Then the enemy looked toward Aegis and Lila. Even with Sandy and Alan still arguing like always, the enemy admitted he would have liked to keep enjoying this fight and Zeke's strange style a while longer. Still, he said he could never accept losing to a lizard and some 3-star brat. As he spoke, MC noticed the hard resolve in the enemy's eyes. Then, without warning, the enemy shoved his own hand into his chest. The moment he triggered his magic, his golden aura blasted upward, sending a shockwave across the battlefield. As the force knocked off his cap, he swore he'd finish the mission even if it killed him. At once, the ground started shaking. Alan's face changed, and he warned everyone that something was moving under them. Cracks spread everywhere as countless earth spikes burst up from below. Sandy and Lila dodged quickly, wondering if this was some advanced spell. Aegis corrected them right away. This wasn't a spell. Instead of using a technique, the enemy's huge magic power was forcing the land itself to move for him. Watching closely, Zeke noticed the hardness and sharpness of the earth around them had become way stronger than before. He couldn't help but wonder if the enemy was overloading his aura or his magic. Either way, his power had clearly jumped. Zeke also understood that power like that had to come with a brutal backlash. Then Vanille's eyes widened. The enemy slowly raised a hand, and the earth around him gathered into a giant boulder high overhead. Everyone's attention snapped to him as more earth piled into the growing mass. He only smiled, excited to see what would happen next. Vanille and Sandy stared up at the huge boulder, and Sandy yelled, asking if he planned to drop it right on them. Aegis quickly warned them that things had turned very dangerous. There was nowhere left to run. At this rate, the Chaos Stone would be destroyed. Layla asked if they weren't supposed to break the Chaos Stone themselves, and Aegis said yes. But once it shattered, the rift would start closing. Sandy panicked and asked if that meant they'd get trapped inside the rift. Vanille covered his ears and snapped that if she had enough energy to scream, she should help stop the enemy. Laika agreed. They had to stop him now, but getting close was the real problem. The wild energy around the enemy and the shifting ground made any approach almost impossible. Then the enemy drove his sword into the ground and declared it was already too late. According to him, this was where they all died. Laika's eyes widened as the enemy cast False Star, sending the giant boulder down toward the Chaos Stone. Vanille and the others froze for a beat, but Zeke's face hardened as he slowly raised a fist. Laika snapped everyone out of it and ordered them to destroy the boulder with everything they had. Aegis poured aura into his sword and got ready to strike. Lila gathered purple aura into her staff. Vanille and Alan started casting strong wind spells at once while Sandy and Laika finished charging their lightning techniques. The second they were ready, they all fired together at the falling boulder, and a huge explosion burst across the sky. When the smoke cleared, Laika could barely believe what she was seeing. Sandy looked just as worried. Even with all their power combined, the boulder hadn't taken any damage and kept falling toward the Chaos Stone. Their enemy dropped to one knee from exhaustion, but still wore a smug grin. He said he'd poured all his power into that spell, enough to reach the level of a 7-star technique. No group of 3-star fighters could ever break it. Vanille cursed and told Alan to attack with him. Together, they launched powerful wind tornadoes to try to slow the boulder, but Lila quickly saw that even their combined wind magic couldn't stop it. Through all of this, Zeke stayed quiet as he watched everything happen. Then a big grin slowly spread across his face as he stared at the giant boulder above. Laika suddenly shouted Zeke's name in shock when he blasted into the air straight at the falling boulder. As he flew, the protagonist realized his current 2-star power wasn't enough to destroy it with aura attacks alone. As far as he was concerned, the easiest answer was to punch it himself. Golden aura burst around his fist as he slammed a punch into the boulder. It only left a scratch. Even then, MC laughed. He knew his fist would probably break before the boulder did, but that still didn't make him stop. He punched the same spot again and again and again. Every blow hammered that exact point. As the barrage went on, Zeke finally saw real damage spreading through the boulder. With a roar, he gathered every bit of strength he had left and threw another crushing punch. His aura flared and his blood surged. Under the non-stop assault, cracks raced across the boulder, and its structure finally started to break apart. Still on one knee and holding his chest, the enemy stared in disbelief. Zeke didn't hesitate. He called up World Crumbling Strike in his right hand and World Bursting Strike in his left. By using both at once, he pulled off the second form of the Dragon Destruction combat arts. Then he declared this was the end and fired off the World Annihilating String. The blast sent aura tearing through the area, and the giant boulder was blown to pieces. At the same time, Zeke finally broke through to the 3-star level. His teammates were stunned. The same boulder all of them failed to damage was destroyed by him alone, but Laika's shock quickly became panic when she saw the shattered pieces raining down toward the Chaos Stone. Aegis took off at once and shouted for Vanille. Vanille answered right away and said he'd handle it. Together with Alan, he wrapped the Chaos Stone in strong wind aura to block the falling debris. Once that was in place, Vanille told Aegis to take care of the rest. As he ran, Aegis built up speed before leaping into the air toward the Chaos Stone. Golden aura covered his sword as he got a secret technique ready. He swung with all his strength at one of the biggest falling chunks, but his sword broke on impact. Looking at the shattered blade, Aegis could only realize how far he still had to go. While the others kept guarding the Chaos Stone, their 5-star enemy still couldn't accept what had happened. After everything he gave up, Zeke had still destroyed Fallstar. The protagonist walked up to the beaten enemy and said he was the last problem left. With his arms crossed, he casually asked what he would do now. The man pulled his sword from the ground and said the answer was obvious. Using the last of his strength, he charged and swore to finish his mission no matter what. Zeke, impressed by that resolve, tightened his fist. Before the attack could land, MC slammed a crushing punch into his chest. Blood burst from the enemy's mouth, and his eyes rolled white from the impact. As he died, he admitted he couldn't believe a dragon had been hiding among lizards. As the man dropped, Zeke watched in silence. He admitted that his enemy's will to keep standing until the end was truly admirable. Once the Chaos Stone was safe, Laika and the others rushed over to him. Laika quickly asked if he was okay, and Zeke answered like that was a silly thing to ask. Aegis smiled and said even he hadn't expected the protagonist to beat a 5-star enemy. Vanille, looking annoyed, reminded them that worrying about the protagonist was always a waste of time, though he agreed MC was completely insane. Alan then pointed out that he had been only 2-star when the fight started. When they realized he had reached 3-star, everyone went quiet and he seemed even more like a monster. Layla congratulated him on moving up. Sandy said she finally understood why everyone called him a monster. In reply, Zeke just grumbled that they were being rude. Then he smiled and told them all they fought well, saying he was proud of everyone's effort. Just then, the birds chirped to get his attention. The protagonist praised them too and said their training had clearly worked. Laika walked over to the birds and said she didn't know much about them, but she truly thanked them for holding back the monsters so the others could focus on the enemy. She gently patted one bird on the head and thanked it from the heart. Meanwhile, Edges said nothing as he stared at the dead 5-star fighter. After a moment, he noticed a necklace around the man's neck. Curious, Edges stepped closer and picked it up. A closer look showed it was actually a dog tag. When Edges said the engraved name was Jack Rock, Sandy repeated it in shock. She said her father had mentioned Jack Rock before. He was an elite of the Kerberos family known as the Hound. Sandy shouted again when it hit her. They had really beaten him. Vanille had a hard time believing someone on a secret mission would carry something that could expose him, and Lila wondered if their enemies were really that careless. Edges offered another idea. Maybe they never even thought they could lose. When Vanille asked why, Edges explained that the rift only let people up to 3-star enter, yet their enemies had still sent several 4-star fighters and even an elite 5-star warrior. They probably never imagined defeat was possible. Laika agreed. Their enemies clearly meant to wipe them out inside the rift but never expected them to be this strong. Still, most of the credit belonged to Zeke. He brushed off the praise and said there was a lot to think about later. But for now, it had been a great fight and everyone did their part well. While hugging the birds, he asked if they were finally done with all the serious talk. No one answered at first. Then Vanille said an enemy like MC, someone who solved everything by smashing through it, was probably the worst kind of foe they could have met. Laika admitted that even with the win, they had some very close calls, and she wondered how they were supposed to leave the rift. Suddenly, he rushed over and told everyone to wait. There was still one important thing left to do. Laika asked if she had forgotten something, and Zeke said yes. Grinning, he reminded them they still had to drink the magic water before leaving. A quick note on the Dragon Destruction combat arts. It's the strongest martial art of the Dragon family heads. It was named after slaying a divine dragon and passed down for generations, but it's so hard that only Jilfas and the 15th head have fully mastered it. The version used now is actually a refined one made by the 15th head so later descendants could learn it. It has forms 1 through 4, a special form, and a final form. The first form is all about huge destructive power in one blow, while the second form is built for fast non-stop attacks. Laika had no idea what Zeke was talking about. Everyone stared at the bottles of magic water in front of them, and Sandy asked what he meant. The protagonist didn't answer right away. He just asked if what he said was really that surprising. Sandy immediately said yes, while Aegis and Lila asked whether Zeke had already forgotten why they came here. He calmly said he remembered perfectly. They came to get the magic water and close the special rift. Laika quickly agreed and said that was exactly why drinking it made no sense. But she was left speechless when MC asked who had actually said they weren't allowed to drink it. Without waiting, Zeke picked up a bottle and said that even if they entered because of the family's mission, they were the ones who risked their lives to get the magic water. The Eldragon family didn't change that. They were the ones who fought for it and won it. So to him, handing it over just because it was the mission felt strange, and he asked if the others really agreed with that. Alan reminded everyone that the magic water could create more mages, making it priceless to the Eldragon family. If they acted on their own, they might face the family head's anger. Vanille agreed and added that drinking it without permission could bring any kind of punishment, even execution. Zeke just tossed the bottle in his hand and said that wasn't his problem. In the Eldragon family, strength was what mattered most. So what was wrong with chasing a new power like magic? Aegis said the protagonist made a fair point, but reminded them that without this mission, they never would have entered the special rift at all. MC brushed that off. If the family wanted the magic water that badly, then the family head should have come and taken it himself. Zeke reminded them their mission was to clear the special rift and recover the magic water. Relying on them to do what the family head couldn't do himself was proof of Ball's limits. If he wanted the magic water so badly, he should have had the power to achieve the impossible. The fact that he couldn't meant that without them, Ball never would have gotten the magic water at all. Zeke then grinned and pointed out one last thing. Their mission only said to recover the magic water. No one ever plainly told them not to drink it, and since nobody explained exactly how that recovery had to happen, they could just say they recovered it by drinking it themselves. To him, that settled it. Laika could only stare at him. She still couldn't understand what he was getting at. While Sandy complained he was obviously bending the mission's meaning, Zeke replied that if the family wanted no loopholes, they should have made their orders clear from the start. Maybe the adults could learn something from that too. In the end, he asked if they really wanted to let a chance this rare to grow stronger pass them by and left the choice to them. Holding a bottle tightly, Laika sank into thought. If they didn't drink the magic water now, they might never get another chance to become mages, or at least not for a very long time. But if they brought the bottles back, the magic water would most likely go to the top members of the Eldragon family, not to them. If they drank it now and the family had found out, the punishment would be brutal. Laika slowly turned to Zeke. He was smiling at her like he had no doubts at all. That smile reminded her of the strange power he had shown again and again. Maybe if she drank the magic water, she could one day reach power like the protagonists. Laika stopped hesitating. She said she wanted to grow stronger too and decided to drink the magic water right there. Sandy was shocked by that and asked if Laika was really serious. Laika didn't waver. She wanted more power, and to her, this was the only way to get it. Aegis then said he was drinking one too. He'd always wanted to know what using magic felt like, and now he finally had the chance. Hearing that, Lila admitted she was curious too and wanted to try it herself. Laika then said she needed magic because she planned to become the next head of the Eldragon family no matter what. The second Vanille heard that, he announced that he would drink one too. He flatly said Laika would never become family head because that seat was his. Staring Laika down, Vanille swore he'd even surpass their older brothers, and learning magic was step one. Alan just smiled and said he'd follow wherever Vanille went. Vanille then looked at Sandy and said if she didn't want to drink it, she could stay back and watch. That instantly annoyed Sandy. She asked if they had really thought this through, warning that if the family had learned they drank the magic water, he might kill them. Laika understood her point but said she still wouldn't let a chance to get stronger slip away. Vanille agreed. He knew the risk but chose power over everything else. By then, everyone had decided for their own reasons. Sandy grabbed her head in frustration, then gave up and said she'd heard enough. If everyone else was ready to bet their lives, then she'd drink the magic water too. She wasn't going to let Laika and the others face that danger alone. A moment later, each of them was holding a bottle, then they all drank the magic water together. As it spread through their bodies, a faint rainbow glow wrapped around each of them. When the bottles were empty, everyone fell silent and waited. They tried to feel if anything had changed. After a few moments, Laika asked if that was really it. Even Leela said she couldn't feel any clear difference. Zeke told them a change had happened. He could feel something new inside each of their source powers, a force completely separate from aura. He was sure what he felt was magic itself, so there was nothing for them to worry about. Then they noticed the last bottle still sitting in front of Zeke. Confused, they asked why he hadn't drunk it. MC told them not to worry about him, then casually raised his hand like a finger gun. Golden aura gathered at his fingertips, and after only a moment of focus, a huge boulder appeared in front of his finger. An instant later, the rock blasted into the sky. The group just stared, and Zeke casually called the move rock cannon. He proudly added that the stone he made was even bigger than the ones used by their last enemy. Everyone froze in shock. Aegis immediately asked how he was using magic without ever drinking the magic water. Leela added that Zeke shouldn't have even known how magic worked. The protagonist said it was like how he learned Laika's lightning aura and Vanille's wind aura. After taking in enough spells, he had started using magic without even noticing it. Even Zeke didn't fully get it. But thanks to Dragon King's breath, his body kept absorbing the magic inside every spell he endured. Over time, that power built up in his source power until it turned into magic on its own. As for casting spells, he said he just copied the flow of magic he saw from their last opponent. Laika could barely believe MC copied magic after seeing it once, while Vanille could only stare and call him a total freak. He just laughed, then explained the real reason he hadn't drunk the last bottle. Someone still needed to bring one back to the family. That way, the family head would at least get something for the investment. Even Laika, though reluctant, admitted that Zeke's logic made sense. She then said they needed to stop arguing and leave. They had already drunk the magic water, so now the only thing left was getting out of the rift. Aegis agreed, but warned that escaping would be the hard part. They had been told that the only way to close the rift was to destroy the Chaos Stone, and how long it took to collapse depended on the rift size. Based on the massive Chaos Stone in the special rift, Aegis guessed it would take at least 3 days, maybe a full week before it vanished. Layla said that timing was awkward. Laika quickly corrected her. It was worse than awkward. If they ran into as many chaos creatures on the way back as they did coming in, they might need over a week just to reach the exit, and they still had no clue how they'd get back into the sky. That meant they might not make it out alive. Almost like it understood them, the mother bird walked over to Zeke and called out. When he asked what was wrong, all the giant birds gathered around him and cried out together. Somehow, the protagonist seemed to understand what they meant. A few moments later, Sandy's terrified screams rang through the air as they rode the giant birds toward the rift's exit at incredible speed. As they kept flying, the speed only got more intense. Sandy kept screaming because the flight was so fast it scared her half to death. Even Laika was getting dizzy, and she wished Sandy would quiet down a little, but Sandy couldn't help it. She never imagined the giant birds could fly this fast. Edges admitted their speed was so overwhelming that even the chaos monsters behind them couldn't keep up. And at this rate, they should reach the rift before it closed. Even at that speed, Zeke stood calmly on the mother bird's back like nothing was wrong. When Laika looked at him, she smiled to herself. Once again, MC seemed beyond belief. She never thought he would actually tame the monsters inside the rift and use them to escape. Before she could think any further, Lila suddenly cut in and said the giant birds everyone feared were actually soft and cute. Laika had to admit she was right. Laika added that thanks to Zeke, their mission was basically already done. Layla happily agreed and praised him even more. He beat a 5-star enemy, found them a way out of the collapsing rift, and even shattered the insanely tough Chaos Stone in one hit. Laika just smiled, remembering when the protagonist smashed that giant Chaos Stone, and realized that after seeing that, nothing he did could surprise her anymore. Thinking over the whole mission, Laika felt like she hadn't done much even though she had been put in charge. Layla quickly told her that wasn't true. Without Laika keeping everyone together, the group would never have stayed united to the end. Hearing that, Laika softly said Lila's name before pulling her into a grateful hug. At the same time, Laika made herself another quiet promise. She would become strong enough to truly lead them. And one day, she would become the next head of the Eldragon family. While the giant birds kept racing ahead, Zeke laughed and told the mother bird she was way faster now than when she first carried him off. He said it was thanks to all their training together, and the mother bird answered with a proud cry. MC praised the chicks too, saying they could already keep up with their mother and had a bright future ahead. The chicks chirped happily at the compliment, but then the mother bird suddenly went quiet and looked back at Zeke like she wanted to tell him something. Curious, he asked if something was wrong. Without warning, the mother bird began giving off a bright green aura, while the chicks released a shining golden aura too. To everyone's surprise, the mother bird and her chicks sent those strange auras straight into him. Laika gasped and shouted the protagonist's name. Even Zeke had no idea what they had just done to him. The birds only chirped back like this was completely normal. Still confused, MC said chirping wasn't much help since he couldn't understand them. Right then, Lila pointed everyone's attention ahead. The rift was finally in sight. Since he destroyed the Chaos Stone, it had kept shrinking and was now close to sealing shut. Vanille and Alan immediately saw how much smaller it had gotten and realized time was running out. Seeing the entrance collapsing so fast, Aegis grimly said they were in serious trouble. Laika worried the rift would close before they got out, but Zeke didn't look concerned at all. Rather than panic, he turned to the giant birds and asked if they could still make it. Their eyes lit up at once, and they sped up without hesitation. Sandy screamed even louder as the giant birds pushed to their limit, rushing for the shrinking rift before it sealed. A moment later, they reached the collapsing entrance and flung everyone through the tight opening with perfect aim. Everyone else was sent ahead, but Zeke stayed on the mother bird's back. He gently rested a hand on her feathers. The protagonist admitted he still didn't understand the strange aura they gave him, but this was where they had to part. Hearing that, the giant birds grew visibly sad. Seeing their reaction, MC told them not to be sad. If they stayed alive, they'd meet again someday. Until then, they had to remember their training and keep getting stronger. With that final goodbye, Zeke jumped into the closing rift and told them to stay safe. By the time the rift shut completely, Laika and the others had already landed safely in the forest. Flat on the grass, Ed could only wonder if they had really made it back alive. Zeke calmly told him they were all safe. The forest was still dark, but the black haze from before was gone. So was the choking chaos in the air. Even then, Laika reminded them the mission still wasn't over. They had to get back to camp fast before the Kerberos family found them. But right after she said that, everyone felt a huge crushing presence closing in. Laika immediately asked what that presence was, and Zeke said it was most likely Kerberos soldiers. Laika was stunned they had been found so fast, forcing herself up. She told everyone to move now. But as soon as she tried to step forward, her legs buckled, and she fell, realizing every bit of strength had left her. Ed explained the recovery potion had healed their wounds, not their stamina. He could barely stand himself. Lila admitted that now they were out of the rift. All the tension keeping them going had vanished at once. Laika knew they couldn't relax. In their condition, they had no chance against the enemies coming for them. She thought that if they could just reach Eldragonland, Lady Freya and the others would protect them. But Alan pointed out that, like this, running away was almost impossible, and staying to fight would only get them killed. Sandy kept panicking, asking what they were supposed to do, while Vanille cursed how awful their timing was. Zeke looked toward the incoming enemies and measured their strength. There was one 6-star fighter, several 5-star warriors, and just as many strong monsters. Even if Laika and the others had been at full strength, escaping a force like that would have been nearly impossible. Realizing that, Zeke decided he would stay behind so the others could escape without him. Laika and Sandy instantly asked what he meant, wondering if he was serious. He said that in their current state, they'd be caught no matter how hard they ran, so he'd stay as a decoy and buy them time. He just shut that idea down right away. He knew these enemies were nothing like Jack and the others in the rift. Laika refused too, saying they couldn't just leave the protagonist behind. The protagonist answered by calling her name and reminding her of her dream to become the next head of the Eldragon family. If she truly wanted that, then she had to know her limits and choose what mattered most. A real leader needed that kind of judgment. He went on to say that with her current strength, finishing this mission was already her limit. Even after hearing that, Laika still wouldn't leave him. Zeke put a hand on her shoulder and told her not to worry. He promised to hold them off for a while and catch up later, but Laika turned back around and said with total resolve that she'd stay with him no matter what. Sandy stared in shock, but Laika apologized and said she could never leave a friend behind, not even for the mission. She couldn't abandon MC. Without wasting another second, Laika ordered everyone else to leave. Seeing how stubborn she was, Zeke realized she was impossible to talk out of it. In the next instant, he struck Laika in the stomach and knocked her out before she could react. As he caught her falling body, Zeke called to Aegis and apologized, then asked him to take Laika. Aegis agreed, but asked if he was really sure about staying alone. He just smiled and said that was a silly question. If he said it'd be fine, it'd be fine. The protagonist told them to leave now. If they kept hesitating, the mission they risked everything for would fail. Instead of worrying about him, they had to escape. As Aegis looked at MC, he knew MC had to be exhausted too, and leaving him alone was incredibly dangerous. But when he saw Aegis hesitate, he gave him another calm smile and said he'd be fine. Aegis finally accepted it, nodded, and promised to return quickly with help. As the others ran toward Eldragon territory, each of them silently prayed Zeke would survive. Meanwhile, the protagonist found it strange that people cared this much about him. In his past life, he never would have imagined anyone worrying whether he lived or died. Even so, he knew that with his current body, protecting Laika and the others while facing several 6-star enemies would be very hard. Earlier, he told them he just hadn't trained enough yet, but he never planned to only stall for time. When the Kerberos members arrived, they quickly realized Jack had already failed his mission. Zeke simply stood in front of them, smiling with total confidence. One of them guessed the other kids had escaped and MC had been left behind alone. Thinking that was true, their leader ordered the summoned monsters to chase down the little lizards who had run off, and the beasts rushed after Laika and the others at once. But before any monster could get past Zeke, his eyes flashed bright gold as he released his dragon blood aura. The pressure instantly made the summoned monsters whine in fear, and the Kerberos members froze before drawing their weapons. Meanwhile, Zeke found it funny that they were trying to act like he wasn't there. When they asked who he was, he calmly said his name was him. The enemy leader paused and searched his memory, then realized he'd never heard of the protagonist. Based on appearance alone, Zeke looked like a 3-star fighter, but the pressure coming off him was unlike anything the leader had felt before. As MC rolled his shoulders, he muttered that the technique he'd used earlier had drained him more than expected. Hearing that, the enemy leader brushed him off as a ridiculous brat. The leader decided Zeke had stayed behind as a decoy and asked if he really thought he could buy time alone. To their surprise, he flatly denied it, saying that was never his plan. He admitted he hadn't had enough fun inside the rift, so instead of just helping his friends escape, he planned to keep every one of them here until he was satisfied. That answer left the enemy leader completely confused, unable to figure Zeke out. Just as the fight was about to start, a blazing crimson aura burst out from deeper in the forest. The second the protagonist felt that pressure, his confidence turned to disappointment. Reinforcements had shown up much sooner than he wanted. The Kerberos leader was just as shocked by the sudden arrival. In the next instant, Freya used her Four Winds footwork, crossed the distance in a flash, and landed right between Zeke and the enemy leader. MC stood there, completely thrown off that his long-awaited fight had been interrupted again, while Freya said she came to help him. He thanked her in a flat voice, which made Freya ask why he sounded upset. The protagonist explained that if she was here, then Laika and the others had to be safe. Freya confirmed his friends were safe and said she had come ahead to bring Master Zeke back. MC said he was thankful, but all he could do was sigh. So Freya pointed out that he didn't look thankful at all. Meanwhile, the Kerberos leader never expected someone like Freya the Gale to appear. That made him realize he had to be extremely important. Facing the enemy, Freya calmly confirmed it and declared that Zeke was worth more than all of them put together. The leader scoffed and asked what difference her arrival made. Freya casually replied, "Who said she came alone?" At that moment, the Kerberos members were suddenly swallowed by a dark purple aura. Before they could react, their leader was hit by a lightning-fast slash that nearly cut through his throat. He barely dodged at the last second, then demanded to know who was hiding there. As the dark purple aura started to clear, an assassin appeared on a tree behind them. He let out a lazy yawn and said the enemy leader was better than expected. The second the Kerberos leader saw him, he knew it was Luden, the legendary Phantom Shadow. His face went stiff when he realized even the Dragon Corps vice captain had come for Zeke. Freya gave a small smile and mocked them a little. Now that Luden was here, this should be easy. Did they agree? Meanwhile, the protagonist watched in silence, clearly interested. From Luden's movements, MC noticed something strange. He gave off no presence at all, not even a trace of true star. Even Freya's stealth looked worse next to his, and the easy way he handled his dagger showed incredible skill. While spinning the dagger around his fingers, Luden said he had heard the Patriarch's illegitimate child was unusual. Meeting Zeke in person, he found that rumor very interesting. The Kerberos leader answered Freya at last. Luden's arrival had surprised him, but he insisted their odds weren't gone yet. That confidence made Luden ask if they were looking down on him. Luden showed no worry at all and drove his dagger into the ground. Then he warned the little hounds not to get cocky. Their heads were still on their shoulders only because he had held back. If he wanted, he said, he could take every one of them. That included the whole Kerberos family, but their leader boldly told him to prove it if he really could. Luden only said sorry to disappoint them, then revealed he wasn't the last reinforcements to arrive. A soldier's cloak drifted into view, followed by a huge golden dragon aura that dropped onto the battlefield with crushing pressure. The force drove every Kerberos member to their knees and left them staring in shock. They couldn't believe Mentric the educator had come in person too. Luden mocked them for talking about overwhelming force earlier and asked what they planned to do now. If they still wanted to fight, he said he'd be happy to face them himself. Grinning, he added that if anyone vanished today, it wouldn't be him. The Kerberos leader quickly judged the situation. They still had more people, but going against both the Phantom Shadow and the educator changed everything. Knowing this fight would end badly, he reluctantly said they would pull back for now. Luden immediately asked if they really thought they would be allowed to leave that easily. But before he could say more, his expression shifted slightly when he spotted the enemy leader take out a small purple bead. Zeke had no idea what it was, but Luden rushed in at once to stop their escape. Too late, the leader coldly said, crushing the purple bead in his hand. A burst of purple light instantly swallowed the area, making everyone cover their eyes from the blinding flash. When Zeke opened his eyes again, the entire Kerberos group was gone without a trace. Luden scratched his head, disappointed. He hadn't expected them to have something as rare as a teleportation orb. Wanting to know more, he quickly asked what a teleportation orb was. Freya explained that it was a magic tool filled with magic that could instantly send its user to a set location the moment it was broken. Freya added that tools like that were very rare and hard to get. The moment Zeke heard about it, his eyes lit up with excitement. Then tears suddenly formed in his eyes. He had just learned about an amazing new magic item, but the enemies had escaped with it. Freya shared his frustration, saying they could have learned a lot if they had caught them alive. But before she could go on, the protagonist admitted his real regret was missing the chance to fight them properly. That made Luden burst out laughing, clutching his stomach as he called MC hilarious. Mentric calmly noted that the enemy had gotten away in the end, and Freya could only agree. She admitted she never expected them to prepare a teleportation orb ahead of time. Even so, Mentric warned that the Kerberos family's territory was close by, so they still couldn't relax. Still chuckling, Luden said that now Mentric was here. He was leaving first to get some sleep. Freya quickly told him to stay until things were settled, but when she turned around, Luden was already gone. Seeing that, Mentric simply said he had always been a free spirit. Then Mentric looked at him and assured him they would stay by his side from now on, so he had nothing to worry about. He said that was reassuring, but he still looked unhappy. Noticing that, Freya asked again why he still seemed so upset. Just then, Mentric called out to the protagonist and said he wanted to ask something about the magic water. Zeke simply looked back at Mentric like it was no big deal.